Start, Rick.
Yes, you're live. You can start anytime.
Okay, thank you. I'm very excited to be here. I'm Ian Jarvis. I'm the program director with GeoGlam, and along with Gregory Giuliani, we'll be moderating this session. This session is a little bit different. It will be broken into two parts. The first part will provide an example of reproducible knowledge, and the second part will focus on the Geo Knowledge Hub. Now, a little different than yesterday, we'll be having short summary presentations by each of the presenters, followed by discussion for each part. I'll be moderating the first part, focusing on the Send2Agri tools, and Greg will be focusing on the Knowledge Hub section. So with that, my screen is frozen. There we go. With that, I'll proceed. Okay, you saw this yesterday from Sarah's presentation. This is the way you can interact with the presenters. I want to give a couple introductory remarks. Of course, knowledge management is extremely important to all of our communities, but certainly for GeoGlam, it's been a priority for several years. Our initiative has been active for over a decade, and we've produced a lot of knowledge from peer-reviewed science to operational tools to training materials. This productivity is largely project-based, and our concern has always been that as we see projects come and go, as they go, we risk losing some of the intellectual property that's been developed. And unfortunately, the GeoGlam community, we have a fairly small management structure, and that's on purpose. But really, we don't have the resources to create our own knowledge management solution. So when GEO indicated they were interested in developing the Knowledge Hub, we wholeheartedly welcomed this proposal. And in the last year or so, we've actually been working with them to help develop a proof of concept. The first session presentations will highlight the value of this work and hopefully demonstrate to the broader GEO community the vast possibilities the GEO Knowledge Hub may offer for them. Now we're going to focus on one set of tools. It's a very mature example of reproducible knowledge used within our community called Send2Agri. This was funded initially by ESA, and the work was conducted by a consortium led by UC Louvain. It provides knowledge from peer-reviewed papers to algorithms to open access code, training materials, and it's been done in a very systematic way. In fact, it's been well used. There's been over 10 webinars already, and over 2,000 downloads of the system have taken place. So without no further ado, let me introduce the speakers, starting with Sophie Bonton. Sophie is with the Earth and Life Institute at UC Louvain. Since 2014, she has been a project manager for Send2Agri. Sophie has long been a very significant contributor to GeoGlam and is in fact a member of our executive committee. She's also played key roles in the broader GEO community and is a co-chair of the CEOS Land Product Validation Subgroup. Second up will be Benjamin. Benjamin is a computer scientist, also with the Earth and Life Institute. Benjamin has been instrumental in bringing the Send2Agri tools to life and making them available to the community. In recent months, he's been a really fantastic contributor, working with the Geo Knowledge Hub team to develop a cloud-based click-and-go solution, which he'll be talking about here. And finally, representing the user community, we'll hear from Nosy Seko. Nosy Seko is a remote sensing scientist with the South African Space Agency. She has applied the Send2Agri tools within Africultures, which is an H2020 project, and has also benefited from one of the Geo Amazon Crowd Credit Awards that was initiated last year. She's also well known within the broader GEO community and is co-chair of the AfriGeo Land Degradation Neutrality Community of Practice. Okay, moving forward, we'll start with Sophie and ask her to unmute and present her short presentation.
So, hello everybody. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. And thank you, Yin, for the nice introduction. So, I'm really pleased to be here today in this session about reproducible knowledge. So, I think that today scientists are developing wonderful tools, knowledge, and we need also to take the time to think on how we will share this knowledge and how we will allow other players to use what we are developing. So I'm really happy to be part of this session, and I'm also happy that Sen2Agri is used to demonstrate this possibility. So I have introduced you the Sen2Agri system in my long presentation, and I will try to summarize what I said in this presentation in one slide and a few minutes. So what is Sen2Agri? Sen2Agri is an open source system that is able to ingest Sentinel-2 and Landsat-8 time series in near real time to generate EO products which are relevant for agricultural monitoring. So it is generated 4 kinds of products, which I will illustrate at the right of the slide. So the first product is a cloud-free surface reflectance composite at 10 or 20 meters, and these composites are produced every month. Then you have a dynamic cropland mask. So this is a map of your area of interest at 10-meter resolution, and for each pixel you get the information if it is cropland or not. So this cropland map is produced first at the middle of the season, and then it is updated every month until the end of your season. Then the third type of product is a crop type map. So also a map at 10-meter resolution, but here for each pixel you get the crop type. The crop type map is generated twice during the season, at the middle and at the end. And finally you get biophysical indicators, so LAI, FAPAR, FCover, which are produced for each Sentinel-2 or Landsat-8 acquisition. So Sentinel-2 is able to run at national scale, making wall-to-wall processing at 10-meter spatial resolution. So it means that in terms of monitoring, you can monitor a country at the parcel resolution. This is very important to handle both aspects. And so it opens a lot of possibilities. So you get the 4 products I have mentioned, and you can combine them. And so doing that, you can, for instance, monitor the growing conditions in a crop-specific manner by crossing the LAI and your crop type map. Using the crop mask and the crop type, you can compute early estimates of the cultivated area of your crop, main crop types area from the mid-season. And you can also use your LAI to estimate the crop yields, for instance. So these are big examples, and there are many more. I'm sure that you get them in mind. So Sen2Agri is a system that can be run on the cloud, but also on a local server. It offers you a seamless processing, so it really starts from the beginning by reading or downloading the level 1 products, and it is handling the pre-processing and the processing of the product until their final format and a user interface. So it is running on a Linux platform, but you don't need to be a Linux geek to operate Sen2Agri system, so you can do it through a very friendly graphical user interface. This is free, open source, under a GPL license. So Sen2Agri has been developed during a project that lasted 3 years and a half, and now the project is over, but the system is still there with an active user community. Jan mentioned it at the beginning. We have more than 2,000 downloads. The first version of the system was released in 2017, version 1.0, and now we are at the version 2.0.2, just to show that the system is evolving based on the experience we are doing, the feedback we receive. We have a website, a forum, where we try to answer all the questions we had from the users. We are also investing in capacity building. We organize webinars every 2 months where we present what we are doing and where we are collecting the feedbacks. And we are also organizing trainings. So there was a big in-person training organized in September 2019 in Belgium, but more regularly we are also doing some online trainings. So Sen2Agri is there, an open source tool. We have also the Sentinel time series provided by the Copernicus program, and now we can easily access clouds. So with these three components, we need to realize that EU agriculture monitoring is feasible for any user, for any country. But we need to invest in an appropriate capacity building, to allow these external players to use our tools and our data. My last point for this short presentation is, of course, the possible evolution of Sen2Agri. Sen2Agri is a wonderful tool, but this is certainly not an end. So we are working on its evolution in different projects which are mentioned here, Sen4CAP, Sen4Stat. And we are working on integrating Sentinel-1 also. This is important in regions where we have high cloud cover during the growing season. We are also working on the switch between mapping the crop type, what is done in Sen2Agri, and monitoring the agricultural practices. So here we would like to know if a field is tilled or not, if we are doing intercropping, when we are harvesting the crops and so on. So we are at the level of the practices. And the last module that needs to be included in this kind of tool is, of course, about the crop yield. So this is coming. Some of them are already there in the Sen4CAP tool, which is already available. And other ones will come in the Sen4Stat, which will come a bit later. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sophie. So we'll move on to Benjamin now and talk about the click-and-go version of Sen2Agri.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. My short presentation here will be over the click-and-go version of Sen2Agri. So we worked with a GEO team to install it on AWS Cloud, a solution that allows you to run Sen2Agri without full installation. So you can go to the next slide, please. So the first question might be, why running Sen2Agri in the cloud? Because Sen2Agri can also run a local data center or local server room. But why the cloud? Because Sen2Agri might need some big capacity of processing, RAM, and storage. So in the cloud, you can easily change the amount of resources allocated to your machine. If you just want to run a small test in a small zone, you can have less CPU and RAM than if you have to run Sen2Agri on a large area or a country level. Another advantage is that all the L1C images of Sentinel-2 are available in the bucket. So what's the bucket? It's a term used by Amazon, but basically it's a big storage that you can access. And there is a bucket containing all the L1C images. So you can just use the full archive of images, because if you work in a local infrastructure, you have to download all the data and on the Sci-Hub from ESA, and there is only 1 year of archive available online. And a third point will be the access to the images. So as I just mentioned, if you work in a local infrastructure, you have to download all the data, all the images. So it can take time, and that time depends on the connection, the network connection you have. But if you work in the cloud with the Amazon cloud here and the bucket, the link to the images is really fast, so it's instantaneously. So you can just access the images without downloading the images. Can you go to the next slide, please? And so what we did to simplify the installation on AWS is create an AMI, so it stands for Amazon Machine Image. So we first created an instance, and we install all the CentuAgri system on the instance. And then from that instance, we created an image, an AMI. So the AMI does not contain any, let's say, personal data, so any credentials to access to the SIOB and that kind of information. No SSH key, and it's really a generic image. And from that image, we can run multiple instances. And for each instance, we can then allocate the resources we want and the storage capacity needed for the project. So basically, what we have to do is share the AMI with your AWS account if you want to use it. Then you just have to launch an instance with that based on that AMI, and then configure your credentials on the CentuAgri web interface, and CentuAgri is then is ready to use. So all the steps on the right, you can skip them. All the installation steps, mount the bucket, mount the disk, so you really save some time. And yeah, it's all from me.
Okay, thank you, Benjamin. That's very good. We'll move on to the user side and hear from Nosiseko.
Good day, everyone. In my presentation, I'll give a brief background of the H2020 Agricultures project that we received the Amazon credits for, and also discuss the use of the CentuAgri system in a cloud environment in support of the Agricultures project. Next slide, please. Thank you. The agriculture system is a geospatial decision support system that supports decision making in the field of food security and agriculture in Africa by improving crop and grassland monitoring and providing early warning products, and also reducing errors in yield estimation. The system is currently being developed by 17 partners from Africa and Europe, and it has been migrated to the Amazon cloud environment. Basically, there are two versions of the system. There's a full version, and there's also a community version. The community version is the one that has been migrated to the cloud environment. The difference between the versions, the full version has 7 services, which I'm going to describe later on, and the community version has 4 services. So basically, the 4 services that are provided in the community version are water service, which focuses on the provision of water quality and water quantity products, and crop service, which focuses on the crop monitoring and yield estimation products, and the livestock service, which focuses on the rangelands mapping and rangelands monitoring and assessment products. And lastly, the climate service, which focuses on the provision of the information on climate variability and long-term changes. So this project will also enhance technical skills of the African partners in cloud computing for rapid processing and dissemination of products. Next slide, please. The CentuAgri system is used for product development for the agriculture services. Basically, the system was launched in the AWS cloud platform. And basically what we've done so far is to develop various products from Sentinel-2 for the Bothaville site in South Africa for the 2018-2019 summer growing season. So the products that we've managed to develop so far are level 2 products, which is the atmospherically corrected data, level 3 products, NDVI, LAI, fraction of vegetation cover, and now we are currently in the process of developing the level 4 products, which is a crop type. So these products, for instance, the leaf area index are used for crop growth monitoring. Leaf area index and FAP are used for crop growth monitoring, at a field scale throughout the growing season, as shown in the LI figure, whereby the changes are seen within 5 days. And also the leaf area index product is also used for biomass estimation for rangelands monitoring. From the level 2 data, the other biophysical parameters as well have been developed, like your leaf chlorophyll and also the canopy leaf water. These products are also used for crop conditioning to detect stress due to water or nutrient deficiency. The details of this are in the on the full presentation. In terms of the experience as a user, at the moment, yes, the system works very well, but we are still unable to view the products from the products window, and also are unable to download the products. So we have to download the products using the scripting and the Linux environment, which also poses some kind of challenge to individuals who are not familiar with scripting and Linux. Thank you. That's all for me. Thank you.
What was a 15-minute presentation and condensing it down to 1 or 2 slides, keeping us on time, leaving a good bit of time for questions. So in that respect, I'll close this off. Stop sharing my screen. Turn on my video so you can have the pleasure of seeing me. And start into the questions. And remember, please submit your questions on Slido. To start off, perhaps start with Benjamin. As I understand it, the Sen2Agri AMI is, of course, Amazon specific. The question is, can we run Sen2Agri and other cloud services? And you seem to indicate yes. And if so, what is the potential to develop click-and-go type approaches for other cloud services as well?
So yes, we run Sen2Agri here on AWS. So the name AMI, Amazon Machine Image, is really related to Amazon, but Sen2Agri has already been installed on other cloud. So it's not specific to Amazon. And I don't know all the available systems in other clouds to create such AMIs, but all clouds have systems like snapshots and that kind of things that allows you to create some kind of images. It's not, the name is not the same, but some kind of images with a basic install and then run multiple instances from that image.
Okay, thanks. Sophie, in your experience, who are the major users of the Sen2Agri system?
In fact, there are many types of users. Anyone which wants to produce some agricultural information on its area of interest is a potential user of Sen2Agri. So we have national users, Ministry of Agriculture, national statistical offices who can use Sen2Agri. International agencies, for instance, the World Food Programme is using Sen2Agri. It can also be used by researchers, so university lab, international research centers, private company, so no restriction.
Okay, kind of a supplemental to that. Jono was asked, have you seen national governments and institutions taking what you have created as a baseline and tailoring it to meet local needs?
Well, we have been working with ministries or with companies having the mandates to support the ministries. What I can say is that it takes time when you are working with official ministries to we need to take the time that they uptake the system and that they use it. But yes, this is in progress. And in the Sen4Stat project that I mentioned in my short presentation, we are working with 5 national statistical offices or sub-entities of the Ministry of Agriculture to work exactly on that topic. So ingesting EO time series to support the statistics in agriculture.
Excellent. So Nosieko, as a kind of a general cloud question, as a user of Centuagri, what role do you see open access cloud services playing in your country and the rest of Africa?
Most of the African countries or institutions, they lack infrastructural capacity to store, process, or analyze big data, which is generated by the multiple low to high resolution satellite missions such as your Copernicus, Sentinels, etc. So the cloud environment allows African countries, institutions to rapidly access, manipulate or deploy processing chains or tools to derive EO-based informational products. It also enables the swift distribution of the products to various users on the ground.
Thank you. I think we'll go back to Sophie for this one. The GEO Knowledge Hub ambition is to be a central hub providing access to codified knowledge. In you and your users' perspective, I should say, what are the most important aspects that will make it successful in your view?
Can try to answer first, but maybe Nosiseko can also contribute. So from what we hear from our users, I think that there are different kinds of supports that are needed. And the first is certainly direct support on the infrastructure. So we have the forum which is in place, but when we start with a user, usually we manage to get a direct interface with the platform where they install the system. And it is really important to invest on the first steps, because if a user is stopped at the first step, they will not go further. And so this is something which is very important. And in that line, any documentation, but not only PDF documents, but videos, tutorials can be really, really helpful on that. But yeah, I'm on the producer side, so.
Nosiseko, do you have anything to add to that?
Basically, on the user side, the continuous support, like she says, the tutorials, the videos are quite important, so that the users have something to refer to when they get stuck, and also making sure that the user feedback is actually incorporated in terms of improving the system as we go along. As I mentioned earlier in my presentation, that as users, for instance, at the moment, we cannot click to download the products. We had to use the script via the Linux machine to actually access the buckets. It's one of the things that we need to make sure that as a developer or the producer, we keep the interaction and the communication with the user so that we get the actual feedback on the system.
Maybe I can just add something related to the click and download products. So if you download the last version of Centuagri that's available, you will not have any problem with downloading the products and view the product. But here, during the creation of the AMI, with one or two bugs that we had to correct with the Centuagri developers also, and so in the current version that is running for you, we still have to correct that bug. But anyway,
I think that I think that the AMI is exactly this objective. Is to directly provide the machine to the users, which is ready to use, and so without you give them the possibility to avoid them all the installation and so on and so on. So this is contributing to this objective.
So this is really democratizing access to these what are fairly sophisticated, cutting-edge tools. I can really appreciate that. We have some other questions coming in. Do you have an analysis of the benefits of having shared the Centuagri system with various users? I guess that's looking for, I guess, a structured analysis of users, surveys, that sort of thing.
So not exactly on that way. During the webinars, we are regularly doing user survey, so to know what they are doing with Send2Agree and what they need in terms of support or in terms of development. These surveys take place once or twice a year, but we did not really take the time to structure it and in a kind of report. So this is more in an informal way, let's say.
Okay. Coming in, doesn't the first step mentioned by Sophie involve connectivity, infrastructure, and investment needs? Anybody want to comment on that?
Well, maybe the first step I was mentioning is really the installation. I think this is the thing that makes people afraid. So because people who are using Send2Agree are not necessarily a Linux expert. I'm not at all a Linux expert, but I'm using Send2Agree. And so I think this is important to decouple the installation and the operation of the system. This is one thing. And then in terms of connectivity and so on, that's clear that if you have to download all the data because you are running on a local server, you need to have the infrastructure to do so. This is why here we are offering a cloud solution, and in fact, usually Send2Agree is used on the cloud, even if it is technically possible to use it locally. Yeah.
Okay, so it's really lowering the bar to access I'd just say the GeoGlam philosophy around ITC or the technology side is a federated approach, really where we as a community can create tools such as Send2Agree and then provide access through as many infrastructure platforms as possible. So it wouldn't be limited that way. Plus, we know that the platforms are continuously evolving, so I see the work that you've described in Amazon as just being the start, and we'll move forward and from there with Send2Agree, but also other tools as they come along, like the Send4Cap and tools, for instance. Okay. Question, are you getting a lot of people contributing back to the open source code base? Is there a community, and what tools are you using?
It for me.
Yeah.
So, Benjamin,
I'm not developing Send2Agree, so I don't. I'm not really contributing directly to the code in Send2Agree. I'm more in testing part, so we tell everything that we have to correct to the developers. But maybe Sophie, you know more about the contribution really on the code from other people.
In fact, we did not get contribution in terms of new modules that could be added or plugged to Send2Agree. That we did not get. What we get is users that are modifying the existing processors, modifying them to working on the interface between the Send2Agree system and their system, probably like Gnosis Echo has explained, to include Send2Agree in a much larger monitoring system, but also to deviate a little bit the finality. For instance, we are doing crop type mapping. We know that it has been used for general land cover mapping, for grassland also. And so it requires some adaptation, but here this is more adaptation than really doing new development that can be coupled with the system.
Okay, I have one for Gnosis Echo. How much technical capacity do you need to run the Send2Agree? And the question just disappeared. Okay. How much technical capacity do you need to run the Send2Agree tools, and what would you suggest this to a new user to run the Send2Agree system?
Okay, in terms of what we've, in terms of the technical capital, what we've allocated for our usage, which we actually encountered some issues in terms of the disk being full and stuff like that. In terms of the sizes of the disk and stuff like that, we're looking at anything between 500 gigs to 2 terabytes for you to probably to be able to run a full production from level 2 to level 4. However, we are still in the process of doing that, of running that, but at the moment, that is what is working for us. Then can you please repeat the last phrase, the last part of the question, Ian? Sorry.
It is gone. Yeah, I don't have control over the questions that appear on my screen, unfortunately. Can we, if possible, can we bring that last question back? Okay, how much technical capacity do you need to run it, and would you suggest, and what would you suggest to a new user to run the Send2Agri system?
Okay, like I said, enough disk space in terms of it being like allocated in the, if it's running in the cloud environment. So obviously that also talks to the credits as well that you have in the cloud environment. Talks to a lot of things. Obviously, if it's being run in the local machine, I would assume that the similar specifications would be required. So as a user, basically, what I would recommend is just to have, like I said, enough space or credits, and also to use the system to the fullest, because it's got a lot of there's a lot of information that can be derived from the products. And also, when we are doing one thing that we've also noticed when we, for instance, when we are doing the level 4 product processing, is that we need to check our in-situ data, how it's been captured, and also how is the points have then been produced. So that is also critical on how, when you are doing the crop type management, because the system can just crash because of that. So those are the things that we've learned so far. That is your in-situ data is very important. You check your disk space in terms of what you want to do and the processes that you want to run. And also, it also depends on the area of interest that you are working on. For instance, if you are looking at the products that are from the Sentinel-2, which is actually bigger in size than Lancet 8, so obviously you need a bigger disk space and stuff like that. Thank you.
That's good. So I'd like to window down on a bit with respect to in situ data. Not in South Africa perhaps, but I know a number of countries have very big concerns about data confidentiality and security. Things like in situ data and so on. Do you see this as a major barrier to using cloud services, trusting the security and so on?
Yes and no. Yes, because it also depends on the project, on how one, or let me say, on how one has acquired that in-situ data. Because obviously there are regulations, there are restrictions that come with that, as you just mentioned. There might be difficulties in terms of sharing the in-situ data based on that, because some of the data sets might not be shared openly. For instance, I know that in our case, I think it's the yield estimation data that is available, I think, every 2 or 3 years or something like that. So, for instance, if you're looking for a data set that is for now, for 2020, you might not get it because there are restrictions so that you are not allowed, you will not be able to access that. So, in terms of that, in terms of those restrictions, so it's a bit tricky, I must say. It's a bit tricky. So it might affect the product development in the Send2Agri environment. especially in the cloud environment.
Sophie, I know in the Sen4Stats project, you're working with a number of statistical agencies in a number of countries. Do you have anything to add from your experience so far?
We have this request in Sen4Stat to develop the protocol that will allow ingesting in situ data without not getting a direct access us, the producers. So it means that it is what we call a machine-to-machine protocol. This is only the machine where the system is running that will access the data, use it for the processing, and then there is no data on the cloud. And me, as a person with operating the system, I do not have access to the cloud. So this is something that is requested by official or national ministries because exactly of the issues that you mentioned. So this is, I think, this is being developed in Sen4Stat. We have been also working in another project with FAO in Senegal and Uganda, where we have the same kind of requests, and also working on the Amazon cloud, and where we are also pushing this kind of solution. So I think that this is something that we are aware, and we know that this is a priority to be sure that these tools can be used by ministries. Yeah.
Great. That's a good discussion on in situ. I think we're running short of time. We have other questions, but perhaps we'll see if we can take those offline and answer them in another way. I'd like to thank all our speakers. I think you did a great job. As I said, condensing a 15-minute presentation into a few minutes and a slide or two is quite a feat, and I thought you did a very good job. I'll also mention again, all the long-form presentations are available on the GEO from the GEO website, and if you haven't already, I would suggest you might want to check out the more detailed presentations, find out more about this. So with that, thanks again, and I'll turn it over to Greg for the second part of session 3.
Thank you, Jan, and thank you to the three speakers for this great example. So the second part of the session will try to discuss how GEOS should evolve to capture the knowledge, like the example we had before with Sen2Agri, but because if we can imagine that in every group, every community that is contributing to GEO and GEOS, there are a lot of knowledge that we need to capture, and now we really need to evolve. We concentrated in GEOS in getting the data in the past years. Now we really need to make an impact and to share that knowledge and to reach the decision makers with the proper knowledge, so that we can support them in getting the right information on the environment, so that they can take a good decision. So for that, we'll have two presentations in that part of the session. So the first one will be from Douglas Cripe from the GEO Secretariat. So Douglas is a senior scientist at GEO. He's a climatologist by background. So he's a former also colleague of mine at the University of Geneva. So I'm pleased to leave the floor to Douglas to give us some insight on the GEO Knowledge Hub.
Okay, thank you, Gregory. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and to discuss with you briefly the GEO Knowledge Hub. As has been pointed out, all of these are condensed presentations of the recordings that we made, which you can refer to if you're looking for more details. If we could click, there are several parts to this, so just kind of click through it, and there we go. So as we've just seen, Sen2Agri is a tool that has been developed in conjunction with GeoGlam, and it looks at mapping different crop types. And this is an example that was used in our plenary when we demonstrated how the Knowledge Hub could work. And we used it because it's a very good illustration of the kinds of knowledge that are being developed across the GEO work program that would benefit from having a central library, digital library, if you will, where that kind of knowledge could be accessed and applied. So we've been thinking at the Secretariat how best we could do this, and the GEO Knowledge Hub aims to fill this need for discovering, accessing, reproducing, and scaling up knowledge that's developed across the work program. Next slide, please. When we think of knowledge, what we are thinking in terms of is actually the resources that go into an end-to-end application of Earth observations, starting with basic research, publications on methodologies to approach a problem, and then along with that is kind of the more logistical aspects of implementing that methodology in terms of codes, modeling, software, algorithm development, and so forth. And then, of course, you need the basic ingredients on which the application is operating. So that could involve remotely sensed data, in situ data, or both, some kind of combination. And then another important element are results and output products that have been produced using this particular methodology, and then the materials on how to actually use that information. So all of these components within the wheel are what we are terming knowledge resources, and then a knowledge package is the blue circle that encompasses all of these components. And it's the knowledge package in particular that we're focusing on featuring in the Knowledge Hub. Next slide, please. Right, you can see the definition of how we are referring to open knowledge in that previous slide. So how do we propose to go about this? As I've mentioned, as you've seen in this example, the work program, this example of Centu-Agri, I should say, the work program of GEO is the primary source of information that's being developed across the GEO community. And so this is where we would like to work closely with the leadership of the work program to identify those areas, those applications of Earth observations that are mature enough to be included in the Knowledge Hub. And you can see here, this is kind of a difficult image to see. I'm not sure if the resolution is good enough, but in any case, you can see that there's kind of on the left hand here, we're looking at identifying the knowledge resources. We're looking at curating and mediating that, putting it into the Knowledge Hub, and then having a feedback loop with end users to ascertain how appropriate, how relevant the particular application is for their purposes. So again, in phase one of the development of the Knowledge Hub, we're looking to work with leadership of the knowledge of the GEO work program to populate the Knowledge Hub. And then also, as we've referred to and has been mentioned in some of the presentations on Centu-Agri, training is very important. And so we are looking at ways in which we can disseminate information that's contained in the Knowledge Hub and train the trainers through a series of means. Webinars could be one aspect of that, and there are many others. Next slide, please. So to sum up here, we are looking at amplifying, if you will, activities of the work program, in particular the solutions that have been developed and which apply Earth observations. And we would like to do this in an open science context where every aspect of the application is open for access, for scrutiny, and for adaptation for individual or national or regional purposes. We're looking at helping activities of the work program scale up what it is that they are doing. And again, Cento-Agri, I think, has been a very good example of this. So it's a two-way street. We want to be sure that the work program is supported by the Knowledge Hub, and that the Knowledge Hub serves as a kind of a sounding board to amplify what's being done there. Again, everything about the Knowledge Hub is open source, including the infrastructure for organizing research. It's going to be built on something called Invenio RDM, which is Research Data Management. It is a package that's being developed by CERN in Geneva, and many other actors who are involved in helping develop Invenio RDM. It's a very stable platform, and the GEO Secretariat has actually been involved in teleconferences with CERN and its partners in helping to develop this. I guess the final word here is once again, we see this as definitely as a two-way street. We are going to, we being the Secretariat, are going to work with the work program activities to help them scale up what it is that they're doing and help others around the world be aware of what they're doing and actually be able to apply the applications in a zero download model, where cloud computing can lower the bar, as Ian said, for countries, especially developing countries, to apply these Earth observation activities. So I think that's my last slide. Thank you very much. Back to you, Gregory.
Thank you, Douglas, for this nice presentation on the Geo Knowledge Hub. And then now we will switch to the second presentation made by Ivan Deloge from FGDC in the US and Stefano Nativi from the JRC on evolving geos to support reproducible knowledge. So Ivan Deloge is the executive director of FGDC. So he's an active member of Geo and GEOS, and Stefano Nativi is the big data lead scientist at GRC of the European Commission, and he's also deeply involved in Geo since a lot of years. So Stefano and Ivan, I leave you now the floor.
Okay. This is Stefano Nativi. I don't know if Ivan is still here, but anyway, I mean, I can start, and then, of course, Ivan, you are free to jump in whenever you like. So, as you can appreciate watching our video, we have started this year a new foundational task, which is called GEOS Implementation Development task, and this is going to cover a set of different components in order to address what are the new needs and the challenges raised by GEO as of its GEO Strategic Plan 2016-2025. And in particular, here we want to, as Gregory also mentioned, we want to move from a data-centric approach to a more knowledge-driven approach in order to serve further and serve more different users, not only scientists, but in particular decision makers and in some cases citizens, of course. And then another important challenge is to provide support in order to understand what is going on in terms of global change, so to run simulation and to provide a forecast as far as possible. And finally, as I said, we have to move into knowledge generation by leveraging the ultimate technologies developed by the digital revolution, and in particular, of course, here I'm talking about big data, but in particular machine learning, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, and digital twins. So these are the big challenges for the next years of GEO, and this task has been promoted in order to, start discussing how to support and GEO and how to develop a new and advanced GEOs addressing all these challenges. I guess that you can go to the next slide. Thank you very much. I think okay. So clearly, in doing that, one of the component is the support to the GEO Knowledge Hub, and the GEO Knowledge Hub is one of the components. And in particular, the GIDTT is asked to provide the connection of the GEO Knowledge Hub to the community. So in terms of knowledge body provided by the GEO members, and in terms of users, so user needs. And this is done through the GEOS platform in the general sense. The GEOS platform is going to be advanced into a real ecosystem, so not just one component, but an ecosystem of different components. And indeed, the GEO Knowledge Hub is going to be a key component here. But they also must be connected in order to establish synergies and in order, to make them more effective and viable. And this is another important support coming from this task in terms of devising a new architecture, high level, of course, architecture for the next GEOS ecosystem. And finally, also we have been discussing what is the role of regional GEO, because regional GEO initiatives are particularly important in order to fill the gap between the global and the national, regional and local level, and to address users, but also to leverage the knowledge bodies created at this level. So what is the role, how they can be, instrumental here in order to connect the different components of the ecosystem. Okay, can you go to the next slide? And this is pretty much what we wanted to say. We have covered at least these three main strengths in our presentation, in our long video. So if you wanted to understand more, please watch the video. And of course, I am and Ivan, we are all available for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefano, and thank you for reminding that all the videos are online on the GEO website. So it's also an important resource for the community. So I will suggest that Stefano and Douglas, you switch on also your camera, and then you will now move to the discussion part. So we receive already a couple of questions about the GEO Knowledge Hub and how we will evolve. So maybe the first question, it would be probably for you, Douglas. So what would that be possible to retrieve data from the GEOS platform to execute a model or a code discovered into the GEO Knowledge Hub? What will be, in other words, what would be the connection between the Knowledge Hub and the existing GEOS platform?
Okay, that's a good question. And I think that to the extent that the data that is included in a particular Earth observation application, to the extent that that data might be accessed through the platform, well, that's one way that it could happen. The Knowledge Hub is not, like GEOS, is not going to be a repository of data. It is going to, however, provide the digital object identifiers to pinpoint the data that's been used in the application, and whether that resides through the GEOS platform or in some other fashion. We want to just ensure that the knowledge or the data can be accessed in that fashion.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think it's going to be still for you, Douglas. Do you plan to use various languages into the GEOS Knowledge Hub?
Well, that's a good question. We're not talking about languages, programming languages. I'm assuming we're talking about the issue is that GEO, when it started back in 2005, because it's got a very small secretariat, it was determined that the working language would be English. So that's kind of the principle that we have been operating on thus far. Now, that's not to say, this is GEO and we accept everything that we're given as well, to the extent that we can deal with it and manage it. So I wouldn't rule out that we might have knowledge packages that are in other spoken languages, but we are not like the UN. Many of you are fully aware that the United Nations operates in 6 languages, but they've got an army of translators and interpreters to do that, and we simply don't have that in the GEO Secretariat. So I guess my answer at this point would be that nothing is ruled out, but in principle it would be English to start with, for sure.
Okay, thank you. Now I see that Ivan is online. So I turn a question to you, Ivan. So there are other indicatives to manage knowledge, such apparently Copernicus is preparing one. So when we will be able to talk about a knowledge system of systems?
Excellent question, and it really goes back to one of the fundamental principles of GEOS, this architecture, that these components need to be interoperable. So that's, of course, is going to be driven by a series of standards, and I think the community has agreed to abide by those standards. So I think we need to do some testing in that regard. I think our colleagues in the EU and the EC are committed to doing that. That's something I would like to see as well, how we bring these various components together and also simplify it. One of the key drivers for GEOS is to make it user-friendly. And there are a lot of complexities, we all know, with a system of systems, but as engineers and architects, we need to be able to simplify the process so we can bring all these various resources together.
Thank you. Maybe to you, Stefano, now. Will usability studies be conducted to ensure that the different GEO Knowledge Hub interfaces, so like the graphical user interface or the APIs, will conform to user needs and expectations?
Well, this is a quite precise and useful, important question. Well, I mean, so far, what we have discussed in task with the people, with the members, of this task, it is to start a sort of stepwise process. So we will start, considering stakeholders who are, the main, of course, stakeholders here, which are the main use cases, the user scenario, and then, to devise a, high-level system architecture. So indeed, I mean, afterwards, we will also to think about, usability, flexibility, scalability, and all the implementation, features that must be considered by design, of course. But, we have just started, and we have drafted a sort of high-level conceptual cyber architecture. So I mean, you can go and watch the movie where we present this high-level concept. But certainly, I mean, this is one of the things that we would like also to include in this stepwise process.
Okay, thank you, Stefano. So maybe also for you, Ivan. So before we had a really nice example on the Send2Agree project and how they connect and how they capture the knowledge. So obviously it's really important for the users. But how do we plan into GEO to expand the GEO Knowledge Hub through the entire, let's say, work program, or at least to try to maximize and to reach as much as possible the users within the GEO work program?
Well, that's the conversation that we're having now as part of our plans for GEOS Evolve, to explore what those possibilities are. We recognize that the hub is going to be a useful component of the entire system, but I think some additional testing, as we like to say, start small before we expand too far. But I think we need to do some sample testing to see how that would work. The software that's being utilized is relatively new to many of us. On the GIT TT, the GEOS Implementation Development Task Team. So the task team has the charge of understanding how we, in fact, leverage what the Knowledge Hub has to offer to be able to support those users.
Thank you. So just a remind also the audience that you can ask your question on Slido using the GEO code. And do not hesitate to ask your question directly into Slido. So the next questions. Let me just check. Well, maybe for you, Douglas, are you planning to create a community blog in the GEO Knowledge Hub to strengthen the community working on specific solutions? So I imagine a mean to connect with the community.
Yeah, I think that's we're open to all ideas. We're discussing many things, but we definitely want to have the community be involved to the greatest extent possible, both in the planning and execution or the implementation of the Knowledge Hub, and then in getting feedback from them. So whatever format proves to be the most efficient to do that, but we're open to suggestions. A blog might be the way to do that, or a forum where we have scheduled encounters and things like that. So yes, I guess the short answer is of course.
Great. So maybe now a more, let's say, technical question. Is there a link between the GEO Knowledge Hub and the work being done in remote sensing domain ontology? So basically using the ontology on knowledge applied to image processing. So I don't know, maybe Stefano, if you can answer this question.
Well, I mean, I'm not very well, into the Knowledge Hub ongoing activities. So maybe Doug, you can cover it better than me.
Yeah, this is kind of at the limit of my technical knowledge about how this will operate as well. But I think maybe the way to approach or to think about this is that we start with the application that's developed, and however that's done, we're agnostic about that. All we're interested in is that every piece of the information chain is available and understandable in open science context, and then we offer that. We combine it, put it together in the knowledge package. And then make it available, searchable and available through the Knowledge Hub. So, whatever technical, aspect that goes into the preparation of that particular application, that's germane for whoever is developing it. We're just interested in making that application available.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Let me check the questions. Yeah, so maybe this is a question for the three of you, Stefano, Douglas, and Ivan. Is once we will be able to reproduce the knowledge, so once, let's say that the GEO Knowledge Hub will be really operationalized, how do you see the connection between the Knowledge Hub and the decision makers? So how can we support the various decision makers in different countries around the world with the Knowledge Hub to support them and to give them proper information?
Well, I mean, I can start, but I'm sure that this is, as you said, there are possible different views here. So I just started with mine, and I'm sure that Ivan and Doug will have some, thoughtful, different views. And of course, in my view, I mean, they are not either or, but they should, all be a complementary, viewpoints. So, in my view, this is exactly what we should, cover when I said that we have to come up with a set of user scenarios addressing the right stakeholders, because clearly, we know very well that there is the need for knowledge. This is for sure, so not just data, but we have to move on, towards insights, information, and even better, knowledge. So this is for sure. The real question is how to provide them, and this is covered well by asking your stakeholders, can you provide me some stories so that I can, learn from these stories, and I can extract functionalities, behavior of the system, so that I can, implement this functionality and this behavior. So, as I said, this is what the task force, what the task team is planning to do. We are working, or we are going to, work soon on a document trying to cover this kind of, stories or use cases, and then, in my view, we will have to devise these modalities on such stories.
Thank you, Stefano.
And I would just add that this is going to require dialogue between decision makers, users, and the providers. And I think the key is going to be understanding what those needs and requirements are, and then developing the appropriate tools, simplified tools so they can actually utilize the complex data sets and information that we know will be available through the hub. So I see this more as an iterative process, and as Stefano has said, it's one of the tasks that the task team has in front of them, is to develop sort of a guideline on how to do that. So looking forward to working with our users in the GEO community.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. And maybe I'll just add one other kind of perspective. When we were thinking about, in the Secretariat, we're thinking about this concept of, a results-oriented GEOS. What does that look like? And in particular, how does the Knowledge Hub fit into this? We were kind of taking the view of the priorities for GEO, the SDGs, Paris Agreement, and Sendai Framework, and how can we help our member governments fulfill their commitments under these agreements. And so we were initially taking the perspective of, say you're a government individual who's responsible for the reporting of that government under one of the SDGs. Take land degradation neutrality, for example, and you're not quite sure how to do that. Well, we were trying to think in terms of how could we target the information available in the Knowledge Hub to that kind of an individual, someone who is somewhat savvy technology-wise, and is also involved in the government. So it's true that the Knowledge Hub may kind of target an intermediate technical level, But at the same time, that's kind of where we started from, is that we wanted to, think in terms of supporting governments with respect to the priorities. But that being said, we would then try to work with identifying, those types of individuals, then help them either scale it down to other end users who might find the information available, useful. Or else maybe go the other direction as well. So I hope there's an answer in that rambling.
Okay, thank you. There are a couple of questions that are popping up about also the use and how to incorporate into the GEO Knowledge Hub all these emerging, I would say, new data sources, especially from crowdsourcing, citizen science, and so on. So what are your view, Douglas, because you are the most involved directly into the GEO Knowledge Hub? How do you foresee the implementation of the use of crowdsourced data and citizen science data, generated data, into the Knowledge Hub? Because that's going to be especially important also for as a kind of reference data sets for training and validating models that you can discover through the Knowledge Hub.
Okay, so good question. Again, if you think of in terms of the knowledge package and all the different resources that are involved in that, to the extent that citizen science is a component in that knowledge package, then for sure that would be referenced and that would be made available to anyone who wants to reproduce or replicate that particular application. I have personally been involved in a citizen science project many years ago, and I really citizen science is something I think is very important and can bridge a lot of gaps in terms of in situ observations. So again, the short answer is absolutely. If it is if it's documented and it forms a part of the knowledge package, then it would certainly be a part of that, which is knowledge that's considered by the Knowledge Hub.
Okay, thank you. So there are also a couple of questions about the Knowledge Hub and the launch of the Knowledge Hub. So what are the current major risks for launching the Knowledge Hub? So in terms of budget, schedule, programmatic, and others issue. I don't know who wants to react on this. Maybe Ivan, I don't know if you...
Well, I would just, at a high level, it's one of the recommendations that we had submitted as part of our evaluation of the Knowledge Hub implementation plan. I think we still need to identify those resources and the planning for that. And I think, in all fairness, we're learning as we go along, which is expected with a new entity like this. But we don't have all the answers there, but I think there are some things we need to consider in terms of the resource requirements. So it's one of the reasons why we are suggesting or recommending a 1-year implementation plan, so we can, in fact, get some better answers to some of those key questions as we move along.
Okay. Thank you. Also related to the work program activity, are you planning to have a focal point for each work program activity that can work with the GEO Knowledge Hub? Is that meaningful? Is that make sense?
Well, I'll answer that one. We are looking to identify within probably, certainly within the flagships and most of the initiatives, those that are the most mature and are producing, services, products, what have you, like Send2Agri. We look to identify a focal point within each of those who can serve as the liaison with those of us wanting to put that knowledge into the Knowledge Hub. So that's kind of a quick response. And just if I could, to go back to the previous question, just wanted to emphasize that in the Secretariat we have the resources that we need to implement this Knowledge Hub, certainly for the next year. So we've been working on that. We've identified, a number of people who a certain percentage of their time can be devoted to that. So we have the resources that we need to do that for the next year at least.
Okay, excellent. That's a good news. So also maybe another question for you, Douglas, about the quality check. So what will be the procedure for checking the quality of the different elements into a package before being somehow validated and incorporated into the GEO Knowledge Hub?
Okay, so there again, we take the perspective that if this is an application that's developed in the work program, that there are experts who are working on this. Again, we take Send2Agri as an example, that are doing the quality checking as they go along. Now, we, of course, we're going to be monitoring, and we've used the word mediating to make sure that the information, the knowledge that's in the Knowledge Hub is robust, it's authoritative, it's trustworthy, and all of these things. But we also have to rely to a certain extent on those who are developing the solutions themselves. And then, of course, since it's open science, others can take a look at what they've done, and if there are, errors of methodology or what have you, then that in theory at least could come to light fairly quickly.
Yeah, that's important. Maybe a question for Stefano. In the next year, the GEO Knowledge Hub team and the GEOS platform team, are they going to work together to move as a kind of in the UN system? We are acting as UN as one, and let's say that to move on the GEO as one as well, to work really together closely, so that we would bring the best out of the community and the both team.
Yeah, no, sure. I mean, let me say that I wouldn't just limit these to the two components, the present GEO platform and the future coming GEO Knowledge Hub. I would say that this is auspicable for all the components of the GEOS ecosystem. So I guess that this is, a sort of mandatory, development. And but in order to do that, I personally, realize that we need this high level, conceptual scheme where you can put, all those components and also the next coming ones, in order to devise how to connect, so that people, teams, may devise, may work together, how to link things. Okay, and this is not yet there. As I said, we have started. You can see the movie, and you can see that we have, started from a couple or maybe, 3 different possibilities, because clearly we counted all the possible software engineering solutions. We now decided to focus on a couple, and maybe the best solution is just to stay in the middle of these two couples. And so as soon as we have a more mature architecture, we can start defining how these component existing and future components, they must work together, and so that we can then ask people, developers, volunteers, to work together on the basis of this blueprint.
That makes absolutely sense, and that will be, I think, a great achievement. Maybe one of the last questions, because we are reaching slowly the end of the session. But on a technical aspect, who might take the raw materials, so all the element of a potential package that came into the Knowledge Hub, and help apply them. So what will be the support from the Geo Knowledge Hub team to help people packaging their knowledge, so with the DOI and all the, I would say, the best practices probably and who will benefit from that? So the knowledge, the Geo itself, the Geo community, or maybe they were also asking about some private companies or other people. So what would be the support basically to go into the Knowledge Hub?
So if that question is directed at me, we have a couple of, well, myself and Paula De Salvo are going to be principally the ones working with the activities of the work program to help them identify what might be suitable for a knowledge package to be delivered. In terms of support, I think we're looking to have a combination of items to try to help with or ask our work package leadership to help with that. We also have very good relations with ITC in the Netherlands and their capacity development with their alumni networks of people who come to use geospatial analytic software and so forth. So that there are a number of options, and I think we mentioned webinars also. That might be another avenue that we pursue. So there's probably going to be a combination of things.
Okay, thank you, Douglas. So maybe the last question, it's going to be still for you, Douglas. It's what is the schedule of the Knowledge Hub? Let me find again the question. What is the schedule of the Knowledge Hub, and what is the number of knowledge packages for the hub to be minimally viable? So are you expecting a small number of?
Well, let's see. When we were drafting the implementation plan, we thought about some performance indicators. What would be a satisfactory result after the first year, after the second year, and so forth of implementation. And in the end, we decided that perhaps numbers may not be the greatest indicator of how successful the implementation is. On the other hand, what will be, or maybe moreover, what would be more important is the uptake of the information in the Knowledge Hub, as reflected in government, in governments around the world, through, especially within GEO. And in reference to the previous question, the Knowledge Hub is open to anyone, not just GEO members or what have you, but anyone who wants to use it is welcome to. I think, if we're looking for numbers, I think we're going to be happy if we get, anywhere from 4 to 6 packages lined up in this expanded prototype, as Stefano mentioned, for the first year of implementation. And then we'll reevaluate as we go into longer term. So I think we would be very happy if we got, say, anywhere from 4 to 6 full knowledge packages available.
Okay, that's excellent, and that's putting some challenge to the community now. So now we are at the end of the session, so I really would like to thank you, Ivan, Stefano, Douglas, and all the speakers from the Sen2Agri presentation. Also to Jan. I don't know if Jan, you want to add something also as a kind of closing remark, but I think that the Geo Knowledge Hub is really, really exciting, and I'm really looking forward to work with you, all of you, and to move towards this great objective on the Geo Knowledge Hub. So thanks to all. Jan, I don't know if you want to add something.
Well, just on top of what you're saying, coming from one of those communities that we've been talking about, I think we're very excited about this, and having working close with the team over the last year, I can see the potential. As soon as the other communities understand the potential that's there and what a resource it's going to be, I think it's going to be a really important service to the broad GEO community.
Okay, so thanks to all again, and good continuation for, and please attend the other session of the GEO Symposium over the day and over the week. because it's going to be really, really interesting. So thanks to all, and take care.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Gregory.
Bye.
Bye.
Good day, everyone. My name is Craig Larley, Work Program Coordinator in the GEO Secretariat and moderator for this session. Welcome to the Symposium short session that gives you the opportunity to pose your questions to the three co-chairs of the GEO Program Board. The co-chairs are Andizwa Malisa from South Africa, Yvonne Petiteville from the European Space Agency, and Yana Gavorkian from the United States. More details about each of the co-chairs may be found on the session webpage. I encourage you now to enter your questions into Slido. The event code is #GEO, GEO. Please select session 04. You may also vote on the questions you would like to see answered today. I will remind everyone that while we may not discuss all of your questions in the limited time available, the co-chairs will respond to all questions entered into Slido within the week following the symposium. You may enter your questions up to 48 hours following the session. The Program Board is one of the three decision-making bodies in GEO, and the one which is newest, having been created only in 2016. The other two, the GEO Plenary and the Executive Committee, have been part of GEO since the beginning. The role of the Program Board is to support the ongoing development and implementation of the GEO Work Program. The Board encourages knowledge exchange and collaboration among the various GEO flagships, initiatives, community activities, and foundational tasks, aiming to build a work program that is much more than the sum of its parts. The Program Board is made up of 32 members, about half of whom are nominated by GEO members and the other half by participating organizations. About 1/3 of the seats come available each year, and there are usually more candidates than there are available seats. The Executive Committee selects the successful candidates for ratification at the GEO Plenary. The three co-chairs are then elected by and from among the members of the Program Board, generally serving a 3-year term. So these are indeed select positions. Without further ado, I will start the questions to the co-chairs. Here, where my Slido is. There we go. So the first question that I'm going to pose here is for Andizwa, and that is, what would you say were the PB's insights from the review process of the 2020 to 2022 GEO Work Program implementation plans?
Thank you, Craig. Well, the review process actually made up most of the work of the Program Board last year, leading up to the Australia plenary and ministerial summits. I think one of the most things that stood out for us was the great response from the community, taking into account that we in the second work program of the second decade of GEO. The tremendous effort that the community put in their detailed implementation plans. Yes, we did have to get back to some implementation plans to ask them to fill in some of the tables, because the Secretariat had started implementing a nice mechanism for making sure that the implementation, the activities of the work program don't report so often every year. So there was quite a lot of information that was being asked for right at the beginning, the tables on participants, resources, and so forth. So for some of those, we had to go back, but by most and by majority, the community did quite a good job in providing us with detailed information. It also indicated quite a resourcefulness of the GEO community, in the sense that most of the implementation plans do not have enough financial resources to back them, but rather have what we can call voluntary or in-kind resources to support them. This is also a big limitation with the GEO implementation plan, actually securing those financial resources. So the later session this week that looks at resource mobilization would actually be quite good for the implementation plan. There were other areas that were introduced, or terms. We started hearing the term for co-design and co-development in the GEO community quite strongly. And this was one of the things that the community was asked for. We found that this was a bit of a challenge for most of the implementation plans, maybe because the concept is new. And I saw in the earlier sessions as well in the knowledge hub, this element of co-design and co-development comes up in different heads, and this is one area that maybe would look at the capacity development working group to assist the community to further define this better. One that we were also familiar with, of course, that's still something that is work in progress for us as a community, is around our collaboration and coordination within the work program. So here we found that most implementation plans are aware of where synergies could be drawn within the work plan. However, those actually taking the steps towards that was still something that was still going to be work in progress. And in a way, maybe this might be a consideration in terms of how we facilitate this going forward in the next implementation plan, because it's almost like you're starting an implementation plan from zero. You don't know if, in this case, because we're moving from an old implementation plan to a new work program, you don't know whether the initiatives that were there before are still going to continue into the new work program. So we found that implementation plans did indicate that they find that there could be synergies between this work program initiative or flagship, but those connections had not been yet made. Where the program board identified the synergies, it then went back to the implementation plan leads to inform them, and in some instances requests for joining activities were made, and the community welcomed this. So I think let me keep it to those 4 or 5 elements, Craig, as being our major insights. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks very much, Ndizwa. It's apparent that the co-chairs were deeply involved in this process of preparing the work program from your answer. Maybe following up on that, I'll turn to Ndizwa, to Jana next to look into how the program board supports the activities in the work program after the development of the work program is done. So while they're doing the implementation, what sorts of things does the program actually do to support them?
Thank you, Craig, and good to see everyone's faces who have chosen to spend the day with us. I'm kidding, I don't see anybody's faces, but I know you guys are out there. But still, thank you for being with us. This is a great sequence for the question. It's almost like these questions were co-designed to be complementary and follow from one from the other. So, I think the best way actually to look at, to give an insight into what the program board is intending to focus its efforts on is actually the construct of this very GEO Symposium, because the themes and the topics that have inspired this symposium actually are largely the themes and the topics and the issues around which the program board is building a variety of efforts. And it all follows from Ndizwa's answer, based on the insights that we've gathered in our work last year. To that end, maybe a little bit about how we're going to address some of these topics that we've identified as common needs within the GEO work program community. Look, we, as a program board, we are hoping to be useful to our work program community, not to be associated just with the collection of data to produce reports. I know everybody hates that, and we certainly want to bring actually value added to the GEO work program community. And so in addition to actually having the privilege of organizing this symposium with the themes that we hope will serve as the majority of the work program activity teams, what we are also doing is, well, as you know, we've finally been able to kick off the GEO working groups. These are the working groups that are going to support the foundation of the GEO work program, the working groups on climate change, disaster risk reduction, capacity development, and GEO data working group. The response of the community to these working groups has been terrific. And these working groups are really going to focus on issues of co-development, co-design, engagement with key stakeholders, policy issues around those specific domains. So that was a major effort, and we're really happy that that is now off and on the right track with the engagement of the community. A couple other things the program board is doing. We've also set up several subgroups that are going to look at issues that are not currently being addressed by the working groups. So these subgroups, and I'll specifically call them out, we have a subgroup on private sector engagement. This may not sound like a new thing, but within the construct of the program board, it's actually a new effort. And the reason why we think the timing is right is because over the course of the last few years, the activities have actually matured enough where we really do have something to work with in terms of both identifying how to best engage the private sector in the contribution to the work program efforts, but also look at where there are already ripening outputs from our work program activities that can actually be useful and serve and be used by private sector as well. So we're looking at, the contribution into the work program activities, but also the use of what our community produces. So that effort is brand new, and we're really quite excited to kick it off. Our first sort of area of emphasis is going to be on engagement of small, micro, medium-sized enterprises across the regions of GEO. We also have a subgroup on equality, diversity, and inclusion. This is responding to a years-long sentiment expressed in GEO for the need for more diversity, geographic, generational, gender diversity. This is also a brand new effort. There are enough institutions and member nations that have experience in addressing this within their own institutions, and we're looking forward to seeing how GEO is going to try to tackle this so we can actually grow a more robust, diverse community of Earth observations. Yesterday, we launched the Awards Initiative, which is an effort of the GEO Awards subgroup. We truly believe in the need to be continually recognizing our star performers, because that's really who are making GEO happen. And finally, there is also a subgroup on urban resilience. While urban resilience has not officially joined the troika of GEO's engagement priorities, it is nonetheless recognized largely as a priority topic in terms of the global policy agendas. And so we do have a dedicated team of individuals from the program board who are looking at a number of areas where urban resilience pops up and plays the part, and looking at coordinating activities. And then the next effort, and this is going to be a big effort by the program board. We are working to kick off what we are calling engagement teams. We maintain sort of the teams into which we split ourselves last year when we were doing the reviews of the implementation plans. We sort of select members, group themselves into teams to build relationships with the portfolios of the GEO work program activities, where we used to ask questions about the implementation plans, but now we're hoping to actually maintain that engagement, but for the purpose of growing those GEO work program activities, identifying issues where they see challenges and seeing how we can help them navigate those challenges and be useful to them. So these teams will be looking at common sort of horizontal topics. We haven't quite kicked them off yet, but it's the next on our list of important things to do. So Craig, get busy. And it would be actually quite lovely if from this symposium participants, we could actually hear in what way you'd like the program board to support you, especially through these efforts, so that we can also take that into account. I think that's probably the high level of where we are today and where we're headed.
Thanks very much, Jana. That's, I would say, a very thorough answer. I'd like to pick up on one of the points that you mentioned about the urban resilience subgroup. I know that Yvonne has been involved in that subgroup, among other aspects. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how the program board engages with key external stakeholders, like UN agencies and international financial institutions, and perhaps use some of the examples of your work in the urban resilience subgroup.
Oh, thank you, Craig. I see that I just have 15 minutes to answer, so I will try to reply in less than 1 hour. So it's a very interesting question, not because you've just asked it, but it's because the engagement of the external stakeholder has been a major goal for GEO since the very beginning, since 2005, and with a little success during the first decade of GEO. So 4 years ago, in 2016, the GEO plenary decided to focus its engagement efforts in 3 priorities, aligned with the global policy mandate. It was the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the Paris Agreement for Climate Change, and the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. And as Jana said before, a system accounting system, ecosystem accounting, and urban resilience were so the 2 other emerging priorities. So what's the policy mandate? The notion of policy mandate is intimately related to some specific activities of the GEO work program. It's required for GEO flagships, but it's optional but not mandatory for GEO initiatives. So the GEO mandate, the policy mandate is either the decision or a request from to a GEO flagship or to GEO from an international treaty, convention, or program, organization, etc., to provide EO products and services. And then we have 2 words in this notion of policy mandate, 2 keywords. We've got a policy mandate. Policy, this is the reason why UN agencies, international financial institutions are approaching GEO, why they engage more and more with GEO, because they are looking for support for the implementation of the policies for which they are responsible, for which they are custodian. And the mandate helps us to define the objectives of each relevant GEO activities in support of the corresponding policy. So today in 2020, we've got 4 flagships. We've got GeoGlam, GeoBond, GFY, and Ghost Forum. For them, I've got a policy mandate. For instance, the GeoGlam, the policy mandate initially came from the G20 agriculture ministers. And since the mandate has been expanded in parallel to the G20 mandate to include food security concerns. Ghost Forum, another example, the Global Observatory System for Mercury, which was presented yesterday by Nicola Pirone. It supports the implementation of the Minamata Convention. But similarly, as I said, some GEO initiatives also have got serve international treaties. Just to mention a few of them, the EO4 SDGs that RG Cavada presented yesterday. We got the GEO wetlands that respond to the Ramsar Convention on wetlands. The GeoHazard supersites and national laboratories that also contributes to the implementation of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, or the land data degradation neutrality, which was a UNCCD for the combat desertification, and that address also the SDG goal 15. So the GEO flagships support decision making at all level, at global level, at national level, at local level. And they have developed and they continue to implement reliable and continuing services in response to those policy mandates defined by these international organizations. And GEO aims to encourage and replicate the implementation of the solutions that have been developed and demonstrated through this through the GEO flagship. So, if successful, the contribution of those key GEO activities to the international treaties and conventions might reinforce the relationship between GEO and those entities that are intimately linked to those international programs. But engaging stakeholders is not that easy. It's a long process. Decision makers and entities such as the UN agencies, the international level, or the national statistical agencies at national level, are often not aware of the benefits they can get from the information which is derived from EO data. Information that sometimes is combined to other sources of data. What's happening?
Thanks very much. I just I appreciate your answer, Yvon. It was very thorough, but I would like to provide a bit more time for to get to some other questions in here. But thank you very much. I think that was a very thorough and a useful answer. Maybe I'll turn to Ndizwa again for a question coming in from the floor here. How do you think that the creation of the program board changed the way we work as a GEO community?
Sorry, sensitivity in the mic. Well, I mean, if one considers where we're coming from with the first structures on the committees and then the boards and now the one program board, I think one of the major advantages of this is having one single governance structure that's looking at the full work program versus where you'd have your institutional development board or science and technology alone, the data alone. Now we're actually sitting together looking at the full work program with coherence across the broad spaces that we're working on in the work program. So I think the biggest advantage of this arrangement, and as a response to the new strategic plan, was exactly that, to actually have a one place where the whole work program is considered versus being considered in small pieces and from different interest groups, if you were to say. Now we can find a balance in terms of what gets to be prioritized, what gets to be worked on, and the information that goes out to the community that supports or that makes up the work program is a uniform communication and a uniform message versus coming from the different elements that we used to be.
Great, thanks, Ndizwa. Jana, I'll turn the next question over to you. This is one coming from Lawrence Friedel. He asks, since the creation of the associate members last November, how have the associates been active in the work program, and which specific work program elements, where are they most active? Some examples, if you can provide them.
Thank you, Lawrence, for the question. So GEO Associates, and I'll just go ahead and assume everybody knows what a GEO Associate is. But in a nutshell, it's a non-governmental entity, be it commercial or civil society, nonprofit, that operates on a national scale and therefore is not eligible to be a participating organization. GEO approved the category of GEO Associates actually at the plenary in Kyoto in 2018, and subsequently the Executive Committee in March 2019 kind of endorsed all the details around that category. So effectively, we've been admitting GEO Associates into GEO starting July 2019. And between then and now, we have welcomed 13 organizations that are now GEO Associates. One of the prerequisites of the GEO Associate is actually that they be already involved with GEO or in support of GEO objectives in some form or fashion for a minimum of 2 years. So we're making an assumption here. It's not just an assumption. We've actually looked at their applications that they have had history in working with GEO or major element partners of GEO. And will continue to do so and perhaps grow their portfolio. Because our first sort of data gathering effort on who contributes what preceded the beginning of the admission of the GEO Associates, we don't really have fresh data that shows what these associates have done in the work program since they've become associates. But we do have information on some of them and how they've been engaging. You know, the organizations like CREAF of Europe, ESRI of the United States, Acclimatize. They've been engaged in a number of GEO efforts, both in the work program, that's CREAF and ESRI, for example. Acclimatize has been engaged in organizing events and having talks around issues of climate change, adaptation, mitigation. But what's really interesting, and I'd like to highlight, is that in the most recent call for members for the GEO working groups, which will support in a robust way the efforts of the GEO work program implementation, we had 10 of the 13 associates nominate members. And of the 10, I think we have 6 members on each, not 6 members on each working group. We have 10 members for all of the working groups. So it's very robust response. They're on climate, disasters, capacity development, and data working groups. So that's effectively all of them. So that's quite exciting, and that really gives them a way to substantively support and mix with the GEO community. But we will have more data as we produce the highlights reports every year as to what exactly they're doing. So I hope that answers Lawrence's question. And if not, he knows where to find me.
Thank you. Here's one for Yvonne that's a little bit more of a personal question. What is the most challenging aspect you find about being a program board co-chair?
If I want to make a joke, it would be that you have to... As a male co-chair, I have to work with 2 ladies that are brilliant and have a strong character. So, but that's just a joke. No. More seriously, apart from the work, the quantity of work, which is quite significant, especially when we arrive at major events. First, the program board, as you said before, is composed of 32 members that have got different background, different interests. And so it's very difficult sometimes on some key topics to find a consensus because people have got a complete different opinions, sometimes at 180 degrees one from each other. And maybe the last challenge I would say is that the program board has plenty of ideas. We've got many very imaginative members. And the difficulty is that we have a limited power in steering the activities of the GEO work program because we have no budget. We don't have. We can just count on the goodwill of the people that are in the various GEO task team to accept the advices or the recommendations from the program board. Just based on goodwill. So limited power in steering the GEO work plan as much as we would like.
Good, thank you very much. We only have a minute left, but I'll turn to Ndizwa for the last question here, and unfortunately we'll have to be brief. What would you say is the best part of being a program board co-chair?
Oh, that's a very easy one. Having these 2 sit next to me is the best part of it. I think the the spirit and the intent that each and every member of the program board brings to the table, the robust discussions, the stressing what's important. So everyone comes around the table with a strong conviction of what is good and what is best for the GEO work program and GEO itself. And that's very enriching. And of course, we get to have a good insight in terms of what's happening within the GEO community, and that at an individual level is quite fulfilling as well, to actually touch all the corners of the work program and GEO matters. But the people make all the difficulties Yvonne has put out, make it all worth it. Definitely worth it.
Great. I think that's an excellent place to end the session. I wish to thank our three co-chairs very much for participating in this session and opening yourselves up to questioning from the community. I'll just remind everyone that you can still submit other questions to the co-chairs. The Slido will be open for another 48 hours, and they will respond to all the questions that are asked. So please send them in. Again, hashtag GEO and session 04. With that, I will turn it over.
You froze there, Craig.
Frozen Canadian.
Okay. Yes, I guess we're turning over to the next session. So, good morning, and thank you for joining the session leveraging advanced technologies with a focus on data cubes. And thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
And good morning, and thank you to the speakers for their amazing videos that set the broad scope for our discussion this afternoon. I hope you have all watched these videos posted online on the symposium website, as we will not present them to keep as much time as possible for live discussions. The presenters will only highlight short summaries for the videos. My name is Marie-Françoise Voidreau. I work with the Open Geospatial Consortium in Europe as a director with the Innovation Programme. With support of all major stakeholders, OGC has produced a geospatial coverage data cube community practice and is pushing a lot of works on APIs to support data cubes interoperability. Before working with OGC, I worked for more than 30 years with Météo France, the French weather service, on sophisticated information systems, managing multidimensional, heterogeneous big data in a very user-centric and applied approach. So we did not call that data cubes, but it was looking alike a lot. I am delighted to moderate this session with Thierry Ranchet. I work very closely with in the H2020 eShape project. Thierry, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Marie-Françoise. Good morning, good day, and good evening to anyone. I'm Thierry Ranchet. I'm part from Mines ParisTech, which is an engineer school in France, and I'm involved in GEO since 2005 and in the program board since its inception, mainly working on energy and Earth observation. And I'm delighted to present with Marie-Françoise this interesting session talking about the tubes and the cubes and the different elements that we are going to use for all our activity. And that's very interesting to look to this advanced technology on the first session. And so following what have been produced and present this on the first session of the afternoon, it will be great to have all of the presenters around us to share their experience and their knowledge about the data. So
we have a 90-minute session, and we have a series of presentations that are going to be done by the different presenter. As Marie-Françoise explained, we have, of course, a series of videos that have been first prepared by all the presenters. I hope you had time to take a look to them. If not, please do it because it's really interesting. And so we are going to use the Slido tools like in the other session, using the hashtag GEO for connecting to this SO5 presentation. And so we have a presentation that are going to be done. Thank you. The next slide. So that's the title of our session. And so you have okay. So here is our bio, and we have the main focus on this session is really the interaction with the presenter. So please use the Slido and the event code hashtag GEO with the selection of session 5, and feel free to ask any question you have linked with the data cube. And so we will, of course, try to remain open for the 40 hours after the session and trying to answer to all the questions. So next one is Eric. That's, of course, our bio. Next one. So the first presentation is not going to be the data cube, but it will be a presentation by Gilberto and Marie-Françoise. Up to you.
So yes, the first presentation, and this will be the only full presentation. Even if Gilberto has posted a longer video on YouTube, the other presenters will just highlight some a summary of their presentation. And the first presentation will be given by Gilberto Camara, you all know as a director of the GEO Secretariat. But before and while being the director, Gilberto is also a researcher in GIS science, geoinformatics, spatial data science, and land use change. So he has a long career of GIS and very applied until visualization. I met him with that many years ago, and so I'm very delighted to open this session with you, Gilberto.
So thank you, Marie-Françoise, and welcome everyone to the GEO Symposium. I hope you can see my slides. So I am delighted to give you a certain introduction to the issues of data cubes and benefits and challenges, and as a certain introduction to what is going to be said today. So, I think Marie-Françoise already presented. My life as a researcher. I am actually acting director of the GEO Secretariat, and I was director of Brazil's National Institute for Space Research. And you can find me more information about me on www.gilbertocamara.org. Right. Okay, the whole business of the data cubes and the whole business of, let's say, the technology that we're putting in GEO is that we want the development of the technology to be at the service of the community. And therefore, what is the whole here of these data cube technology is to make the data, 40 years of Earth observation data, more and more data, accessible as analysis and modeling. As those who have seen the Centuagri this morning, the session, saw that the benefits of the clouds are really important. They empower people to use Earth observations in ways that were not possible before. So, as a prelude to the presentations this afternoon, I'm going to give you an overview of some topics here. What is a data cube, after all? Why are data cubes important? How to build data cubes, how to describe data cubes, and how to access and use data cubes, because these are questions that we all have. Let me start with the first one. What is a data cube? And I'm going to use, first of all, there is no standard definition for that. This is, let's say, the view I hold, but also other players like Edza Febesman, who is a good friend, who is a professor at the University of Münster. This is like, I think we have to agree on some definition. This is the proposal we have. So the data cube is a 3D array with two spatial dimensions, one temporal dimension, and an arbitrary number of attributes with the following properties. The spatial dimensions are aligned with the spatial reference system. So when you walk in space, you walk on UTM or lat long, or whatever, Albers projections. The cells of a data cube have a constant size, so they are comparable. So it's either 10 meters, 20 meters, 30 meters, 5 meters, or 500 meters. There is no spatial and temporal overlap, so each cell covers a specific and singular space and time slot. We know what the intervals are from one to the other, and for every combination of dimensions, you get, for example, the values of the attributes, bands or indexes and so on. This is, let's say, graphically what I'm talking about. You have a latitude and longitude and time, and you walk in the cells. Okay, why are data cubes important? I think it's important because they provide continuous information. They make the big data available to its foremost. Not a single image, not two images, not three images, but in principle, the best combination of images available. With that, one can understand and do things that were not possible before, which is really to do the continuous monitoring of landscapes. We can look at a point in certain place in space, in this case in Brazil, and see, well, this has been a forest for the last 20 years. This was being agriculture for the last 20 years. This was a forest which was converted into pasture, then converted to agriculture. You really see what was happening and all the transformations that happened on that place. And that is a continuous monitoring. Building data cubes, as we will see in the presentations today, is not for the faint of heart. There are a lot of technologies involved. You have to do the selection of scenes that compose the cube. You have to do the cloud and shadow detection. You have to do the topographic and atmospheric correction. You have to do geometric warping. You have to do the temporal pixel compositing. It's a lot of work. It's really cumbersome in terms of steps, and they have to be automated. So the first thing you have to say, oh, I'm taking an area here, and I'm going to select all the images that fit these areas. And this sometimes involves going to two or more combinations of the scenes provided by the satellites, reorienting the satellite, and doing a lot of work on, selecting the best scenes. You also have to deal with the fact that you need to select the clouds. It's not an obvious issue because there are different cloud algorithms. This is a recent paper one student of mine has published, and it shows that there are different algorithms, for example, for Sentinel data. This is the example we had, and they perform differently. So you have to select a good mask that meets your needs. Now, you also have to correct for the atmosphere and the topography. So this is one AISA shows. This image on the left is without atmospheric correction. The image on the right is with the atmospheric correction and with the reflectance. Now, not on the top of the atmosphere, but the reflection, the surface reflection data, which is fundamental. And finally, if you have those images, you may have, for example, Sentinel 2A, 2B, and Landsat for 1 month, and you have to select the best image or the best pixel. Or you may select the combination of one pixel from one image with a second pixel from a second image, in which case you have to be sure that all signatures from different satellites really match. So this is a really specialized thing, and it requires a lot of work. And that's why it's important, the work that our teams are doing. Now, once the data cube is built, there comes the next step. The next step is assessing the data cube. Assessing the data cube is also not trivial because developers have chosen different ways to store the data so that the implementations can be very different. So The Google Earth Engine, which is a data cube, implements differently from the Climate Data Store, from the Brazil Data Cube, from the Open Data Cube. So this is also an issue that we have to deal. The way to deal with this is something that has been shown by the Open Geospatial Consortium, is the use of web services. If you have different implementations, but if you want to have a single way to access those implementations, you need to be able to find out what are these guys, what do I have for you, and hopefully in an application independent way. So you have the single protocol that you can ask the different providers, much as we do now with the web feature service and web coverage service and web map service. This is one of the great benefits of web services and one of the great benefits of the OGC. We need to improve now this to support the data cubes. A simple example which is implemented currently, it's under implementation, is, for example, a time series. Suppose that you had all of the data cube providers saying, oh, I agree to a simple protocol that gives me a time series for certain location given the data cube, and I don't need to know how things are implemented. I get the data cube. So there is a prototype. This is something that has been developed as a prototype in Brazil that shows the way forward. But this is not the only need. The other important need is, given a data cube, how to describe its content. And here there's more progress here. And the progress is because there is a huge, let's say, community development around the Spatial Temporal Access Catalog, the STAC. And STAC is a very promising technology that allows to describe a data cube in, I would argue, in a fashion independent from the actual implementation. So this is something which has to be looked very carefully by the community. And finally, the next step, and most important, I would argue, is a common API. Instead of having to program in the Google Earth Engine using the Google language, the Open Data Cube using the Open Data Cube, and the Brazil Data Cube using the Brazil Data Cube, you need really a consistency of one code and many platforms. And this is, again, an important challenge. Now, after you have everything, that you haven't solved the problem, because the next step is how to use them. Suppose that I have the data is organized, and then you still have to make available a set of open source techniques using, for example, but not limited to, machine learning as means of classification, because data cubes really enable new methods. They have a huge promise, but that promise has to be matched with techniques which are robust. What we have found by working with data cubes is that there is an elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is the variability of our ecosystems. Our ecosystems in the world are quite variable. Global maps are doomed to failure. It's much more important to rely on local knowledge, because the Brazilian savanna is not the African savanna. For example, we don't have elephants. And it's completely different, although they have the same names. So you cannot simply say, I'm going to do a global map for everyone. That doesn't work. Local knowledge is essential because ecosystems are highly variable. So we have a situation where there is a need of a combined effort of both the practitioners, the engineers, and the scientists. We have not solved the problems of the data cube. We have seen how important they are. So we need a combination of science, develop open source tools and open knowledge ways, and perhaps engineers who use the learning developed by the scientists in order to build robust solutions. That, in the terms of the GEO Secretariat, has to be underpinned and supported by open science. we don't see any way to progress in global problems unless we do open science, open education, open access data, open peer review, open methods. This is something that the collaborative network is favored. I don't see how we make significant progress in the global world without a full adherence to open science. So to sum up, what's the challenge? We need open source, widely available, efficient and well-documented methods for providing analysis-ready data and data cubes. We need standards for describing the contents of data cubes and extracting information from them. We need open source, widely available, efficient and well-documented methods for big Earth observation data analysis. And finally, and perhaps most important of all, we need public cloud services that support the GEO community to use open EO data and tools with, respecting concerns of privacy and cost. There are good starts like FAO CIPO and ECMWF Climate Data Store, but they show what can be done. They're not the final. And I hope that by working together in a full open way, we can really develop the infrastructures and the support for data cubes and cloud applications that the GEO community needs. And thank you so much for your attention. Thank you. Marie-Françoise, over to you.
Thank you, Gilberto. That was a very brilliant presentation about the data cube, let's say, first insight, and allow us to understand better the follow-up. So the next speaker will be Gregory Giuliani from the University of Geneva and UNEP. So Greg, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Thierry, and thank you to Gilberto for the great presentation and great introduction. So I'm really pleased to briefly discuss what we achieved so far with the Swiss Data Cube. So the Swiss Data Cube, just to remind you that this is an initiative from the Swiss government, so the Federal Office for the Environment, that gave us the mandate to look at the technology of the Data Cube 3 years ago already. And then incrementally we engage with them, we work with them to test the technology, then to apply it, and now to operationalize it, meaning that at the moment, at least in Europe, we are the first full national data cube, and among one of the first around the world. And one important point that I want to raise is that we wouldn't have been able to set up the Swiss Data Cube without the help of the GEO community and without especially the help of CEOS and NASA, and especially also obviously Geoscience Australia, because thanks to the GEO community and the discussion we had within the GEO community with Geoscience Australia, we came up with this technology. We learned about this technology. They teach us how to install the software. So we had the support of Brian's team to also at CEOS to implement the Swiss Data Cube. And now on our side, now we are teaching around us. So at different countries, for example, we have a small project that is supported by a small fund in Switzerland for knowledge exchange. So now we are supporting Armenia to develop their own data cube. So now the concept of data cube also, it's a kind of pervasive concept, and we are learning from each others, and I think that's the power of the collaboration, and really that's one of the main power of the GEO community. So Rick, if you can just change the slide, please. Oh yeah, that's my bio, but that's okay. We can I just made a couple of points through the presentation that you had a look through the video. So I think what is really important, at least from the experience that we have discussing with the government and working at the national scale, I think that's one important point is that the work that we are doing with Earth observation data should be as much as possible embedded in national digital strategy, because basically now every country in the world has a digital strategy, and from my point of view, really the DataCube technology should be embedded in those strategy to support as much as we can also the development of evidences to support policy making processes. The second point, obviously, and it has been perfectly raised by Gilberto, is all the interoperability challenges that are around the DataCube, no matter what implementation we are using. Yeah. So, for example, the Swiss DataCube is based on the Open DataCube technology and software stack. And really recently, we have implemented OGC services. So now the Swiss DataCube is accessible through WMS and WCS, so meaning that you can access really the data. And now we are working with Geoscience Australia also to implement the WPS, so that also we have at least one way to share and exchange processing algorithms. But obviously the next step will be to look at a common API or allowing to the different data cubes to talk to each other. And we are also currently investigating how best to implement the stack protocol on top of the Swiss DataCube. And I was mentioning before, we're really committed to support now other people and other countries and other centers to use the DataCube technology. So we first develop in the frame of the project that we have with Armenia, the bringing Open DataCube into practice teaching material. So it's a freely available material where you can learn in a couple of hours how to install the necessary software and how to ingest data, and then start working with the data that you store in your DataCube instance. So that's the first step. But we had in mind to expand and to facilitate the work of users. It's a kind of, I would say, approach that is similar to the analysis-ready data. So the analysis-ready data has lowered dramatically the barriers to work with the data and to access the data. But still, it's really challenging to install all the necessary software. So we have developed what we have called the DataCube on demand. So now, based on simple requirements, we have developed an API that allows a user to just to define a set of sensors between the Landsat 578 plus Sentinel-2, and select an area of interest, and then select a temporal frame. And then in a couple of hours, we instantiate a DataCube instance, and then the user receives just an email with the link to the Jupyter notebook, and then the user can start working with his own DataCube. So that's a way we think that might be relevant also for the user community, and especially if we think also about the reproducible knowledge. And I think in our team we are really committed to what Gilberto said before. We want to make all the work that we are doing with the Swiss DataCube as open and as reproducible as possible. We are about to submit a data paper into a Nature Scientific data, where we explain in detail all the material we have developed to pre-process the data, ingest the data in an ODC instance, and then we have a DOI for each specific sensor we ingested, so Landsat 5, 7, 8, Sentinel-1, Sentinel-2, and so on. And all the code that we are generating is freely available, documented as much as possible. So we think this is the only way to go if we want to achieve the last point, is to really enhance the scientific accountability and credibility and reach really the decision maker with good scientific information. So that's really something we have in mind. We want to apply, we want to support, and we really encourage all our colleagues and all the people that are involved in the DataCube to go to community to go in that direction, because I think that's extremely important, especially in those times where I think there are a lot of fake news and misconceptions and so on about the environmental issues. So I think that's extremely important. And that's it on my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Greg, for this presentation on a national data cube to support decision making. And the next presentation will be given by Dr. Brian Kellogg, who has been working with NASA for more than 30 years. Brian also leads the Committee on Earth Observing Satellites, which is more well known by the acronym CEOS, System Engineering Office, which supports the International CEOS organization, which is comprised of 60 space agencies and organizations coordinating satellite Earth observation data for enhanced societal benefit. So a major stakeholder into the landscape. Brian will inform us about the status of the Open Data Cube and the Open Earth Alliance and about his vision for a full network of data cubes. Brian, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. I think you said I lead CEOS, which is far from the truth. I'm just this little piece of the puzzle that is involved in CEOS, so happy to be here today. If you can move to the next chart. I think there's two short summaries. Next one. One more past that one. Okay. So I think what I have here is just the absolute brief summary, but I have a few other things to add to this. So there's two topics that I had in my video presentation, and if you take a look at that, you'll see more detail. One is on the Open Data Cube and where we're going there, and the other is on a new activity called Open Earth Alliance. So regarding the Open Data Cube, many of you know what we've been doing here for quite some time, and thanks to Greg, who was one of the first people to really take it and run with it and is doing some amazing things. It's great to see Greg part of the community, and the community has grown quite rapidly. So our ultimate goal is really to have a network of these interoperable data cubes around the world. Gilberto also brought forth some of the ideas that are going to make this difficult for all of these to connect, and the interoperability issues and the different platforms we have to deal with. So it's going to be a long road, and we'll have to figure out lots of different paths to get there, and likely the technologies will even change along the way, but it's an exciting opportunity. A few things I wanted to mention that are also in my video are some of the new activities we're doing. One is a Landsat sandbox. So by the time that the Collection 2 data for Landsat is released on Amazon, it's about a few months away, probably September timeframe, we're going to have a sandbox available for anybody to go to and use Open Data Cube technology, run some algorithms, and run analyses anywhere in the world. I would say it's analogous to what Google Earth Engine can do, but it's going to be using the framework of Open Data Cube and the approach that we have, and therefore you could then go reproduce that anywhere you wanted in your own cloud infrastructure. We're also working on an Earth Analytics Lab, which is a cooperative project from within CEOS, WIGIS, and my group doing interoperability test bed that's going to support some CEOS projects and likely some of the GEO tasks as well. Later on, you're going to hear from Grega at Synergize. We've started a new collaboration with Digital Earth Africa, Synergize, and my office to develop a Sentinel-1 ARD pipeline. So that the idea there is to create an analysis-ready data product and to have the ability to generate a Sentinel-1 data cube anywhere in the world, any size and shape that you want. There's really nothing like that right now, not easily put into a cube framework so that we can utilize these common algorithms. In general, we've been spending a lot of time working on bringing the algorithms up to date, making them work better, cleaning them up, and hearing a lot of feedback from users on what is the best way to go. So that's where I've been spending quite a bit of time, and our team has made some great progress on what we call a handful of master algorithms, things like mosaicing and water extent and vegetation change and phenology. We're also working on some linkages now to weather data, soil moisture, and developing some algorithms for the radar data like Sentinel-1 and ALOS. So a lot of exciting new things coming along. All these algorithms are free and open, and we're going to work harder to make sure that they're in a common repository with training components going with them. And then finally, SDG toolkits, just to mention that we are have an emphasis on the water extent 661, some work with urbanization in 11.3, and also land degradation. So as these toolkits evolve, we're going to have some contributions there from the data cube. So the last thing I wanted to mention was this new idea of the Open Earth Alliance. This is a brand new concept that's been put forth as a GEO community activity. Gilberto's aware of it, and we just recently got this approved. So we see this as the next logical step for where the Open Data Cube community can really expand and move forward. Up until now, we've been focused on just a few partner organizations that have made the primary contributions and the advancements. What we'd like to see is a broader community of involvement. And so we're thinking that something like an Open Earth Alliance under the umbrella of the WMO GEO Trust Fund will give us more flexibility and the ability to test new technologies and to optimize the impact of what we're doing. So though Open Data Cube would be a primary piece of that, it's technology agnostic, and as things change, we might want to investigate other ideas. But basically, it's things like open source solutions, algorithms, and analysis hub, and doing that within something called an Open Earth Alliance might give us the ability to get some other contributors involved. So I'll stop there, but there's certainly more in my video, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Brian. That was a very interesting video, and I recommend to take a look to it if you don't do it before the session. That's really impressive what you present, and there are a set of ideas that we will discuss later on. So the next speaker are two speakers. It will be about the EO Data Cube for Brazil, and we will have Karina Ferreira and Gilberto Queiroz that are going to present their work through the Brazilian Data Cube. Thank you, and the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to present our project here. So we will present a summary of our presentation that is available there in the Symposium website. Next, please, Chair. Next slide. Okay. So the Brazil Data Cube project started last year, and it has main 4 goals. The first goal is to create analysis red data from medium resolution images for all Brazilian region, including images from the satellites Sirius 4, Landsat 8, and Sentinel-2. For us, this is a big challenge because Brazil is a huge country. For example, Sentinel-2 is the biggest image collection that we are handling in the project. Almost 700 terabytes of data. So as Gilberto mentioned, it's only possible because we are using a cloud environment. We are using Amazon Web Services to process this data set. Thanks to GEO and AWS, because we are using the credits that we win in the GEO and AWS program to do that. So the second goal is the creation. We are creating multidimensional data cubes from these analyzed red data image collections. So in our presentation, we show how we are doing it based on temporal compositions and corrections of satellite images. The third goal is to develop and use big data technologies and machine learning methods and image time series to store, process, and extract information from these image collections and data cubes. And the last goal of this project is to create land use and cover information for all Brazilian territory using the methods developed in this project and the data cubes and image collections created here. In the project, we we defined a grid, as you can see in this picture. We defined a grid composed of 560 tiles, as we explained in the complete presentation. Next slide, please. This picture shows an overview of the Brazil Data Cube project. So we are creating these data cubes, multi-dimensional data cubes, from medium resolution satellite images. And we are using neural network to select good quality land use and cover ground samples. And we are using machine learning to classify the time series extracted from these data cubes that we are creating in the project, and to create the land use and cover change maps in Brazil. So the methods that we are developing are available in our open R package called SITS. And we started to work on this workflow in 2016 in a precursor project called Essensi. And we explained this in our presentation. Next, please. So in the Brazil Data Cube project, we are producing open data and open source software products. So besides the analysis image collections and data cube that we are producing the project, we are also organizing land use and cover samples, ground samples of land use and cover classes, because we use it to train the machine learning methods that we use in the project. We are also organizing land use and global and local land use and cover data sets that we are using in our web services, in our internal infrastructure of the project. The software that we are developing include web services. So we are developing a lot of web services to query, to process, and to access the data and metadata that we are developing in the project. So we are using the spatial temporal asset catalog to disseminate the metadata of our data, cubes, and image collections. We are also developing using OGC web services. So we present this in more detail in our complete presentation. And we are also building applications with graphical interfaces for final users. So we are developing a web portal of the project. And using this web portal, we can download the data, we can access and do some analysis in our data cubes. And we are also using Open Data Cube. You have an instance here of Open Data Cube. We are using the Jupyter notebook provided by the ODC, accessing our data cubes. So this is an overview of the products that we are developing and creating in the Brazil Data Cube project. Next one. So thank you. Gilberto Queiroz, do you want to add something?
Okay. Hi, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon. I'm also very pleased to be here today to present with Karine the Brazil Data Cube. As she has already summarized very well the Brazil Data Cube project, I would like just to add that this project has also a very important role in bringing the knowledge of Earth observation data cubes to a young generation of remote sensing scientists, engineers, and students in Brazil, besides, of course, enabling better applications and providing sound information to Brazil stakeholders. So this is also another part or contribution of this project. I would like also to reinforce that we are very committed to have everything we are producing as free and open source, from the software to the data. And we are very open to collaborations. So this is pretty much what I want to say. And so I give the floor back to Terry.
Well, it's to me now, Gilberto. Thank you very much.
Sorry.
No problem, no problem. We switch, Thierry and I. So thank you very much for this impressive example of integration done in, if I understood clearly, in something like 1 year. As you said, that the project began in 2019. It's a lot of knowledge and technology which has been integrated, driven by a good understanding and knowledge of the problem you want to solve of land cover. So this gives the impression that the data cubes are not a source of problem, but are really helping. So the next speaker will be Fang Yuan from Digital Earth Australia. And Fang Yuan is the Assistant Director for the Product Development Team in Digital Earth Australia program. And since 2017, Fang has been involved in the development of satellite imagery-based products for applications related to natural resources, disasters management, land cover, and change monitoring. And right now she's supporting the Digital Earth Africa establishment team, and which also involves a lot of, I think, of capacity building. And she will summarize her video now. Thank you, Fang.
Thank you, Maria. It's a good evening from Australia. So this slide is really try to remind everyone what is presented in the full presentation, and more details can be found there. I guess I'll just try to emphasize a few key points here. So the two programs that I work for are the Digital Earth Australia program and Digital Earth Africa program, which is in its establishment phase. So both of these programs are continental scale implementation of the Open Data Cube technology. And the other thing to mention is that both of them are funded to be built as operational platforms. That means we're managing petabytes of data for these two continents, and the input data sets are continuously being updated as new observations become available. The infrastructure is managed and monitored so that it's always reliably operating, and also the derived products are generated whenever possible. So there's definitely a common theme between what these two platforms trying to address, like the natural resource management and trying to support economic growth. But apparently we're dealing with very different challenges for these two continents, and that's why we take a user-centric, a user-led approach for both of these programs, which means we actually try to understand what data sets the users will want, what infrastructure the users can use, and what tools will be most efficient and useful for them, and also what information products we try to come up with. And at the technology level, both of these programs are at the core supported by Open Data Cube, but this is really just linking input data and outputs and interfaces to analysis environment. So the input data we work with are mostly free and open data, and our derived products are free and openly accessible as well. So the users are free to access these data directly, in addition to use the Open Data Cube supported interfaces to interact with them. And we do have, as mentioned before, OGC web services, visualization portals, and sandbox analysis environment that user can use to interact in different ways with our data sets. And I really want to emphasize the usefulness of the sandbox analysis environment. So we've built this as a Jupyter Hub environment. So it's entirely built in the cloud and free to sign up to use. And we've implemented it as a very scalable architecture as well. So it this would be the main environment to interact or do analysis with data, the Africa. So we've implemented a way to continuously adjust how the environments are set up so that we can meet the different needs of different users. That people can ask for more or less resources, depend on what kind of analysis they're likely running. And also, this environment, our team is using it actively for our research and development, but our users are increasingly using this environment as well. And in particular, we found it to be really valuable when we engage with industry. So through our both our incubator program and our other experience working with industry users, we the common theme there is data available through the cloud and accessible through the cloud, and also optimized for accessing through the cloud. So really, I can't stress more of the importance of the underlying data sets, the analysis-ready data underpinning all of these services. So as one of the examples that it's really exciting news is that for Africa now, we host all the Sentinel-2 data available and in cloud optimized format. So this is really going to make the analysis really more efficient. And also we're taking the just a different approach for the Africa that we want these analysis-ready data input pipelines to be sustainable. So we're working with data providers directly to get these input data sources. And the last thing I want to mention is really that I think a lot of the value of the Open Data Cube community comes from the sharing of these resources and learning and algorithm. I mean, we have 2 platforms built and by the same team, and it really saves us a lot of time because we can use a lot of the algorithms and technologies developed in these 2 programs. And we work very closely with our ODC partners as well. So for the sandbox, we've built this repository of notebooks with algorithm and examples, and a lot of these we are developed with our partners. So I'll actually stop there, and happy to take questions after the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fang, for your presentation talking about 2 continents. So that was really impressive, and the video is also very knowledgeable. So thank you for that, and we are going to our last presenter, last but not least, Gregor Milzinski from Synergize. So Gregor, the floor is yours.
So thank you. Hello, everyone. So my name is Gregor Milzinski. As mentioned, I'm from Slovenia, and since we have quite a few talks about data cubes, I kind of wanted to address how the data cubes are similar, yet they are different to some extent. Next slide. Next one. Okay. So where I see kind of the major difference is that the Open Data Cube and all the other ones that were presented are either directly using Open Data Cube technology, or they are designed in a similar way. They are focused on building tools for users to actually access this data, right? And this is what they are meant for, and that's perfectly fine. What we wanted to build really is a tool for people who build tools for users, right? So the focus is a bit different. Now, obviously, you can use Open Data Cube to create your own tool, and this is, you have a nice examples of Digital Alert Africa being exactly that. And you can also use Eurodata Cube directly by just accessing the data, but the focus still is different. That we are really trying to build tools for others developers, where the Open Data Cube is built for actual scientists and users. Next slide. Now, I will not go into all the details because you've seen it in the video, or you will go in and look at it. But the Eurodata Cube is quite a complex piece of software combining several modules which address processing raster data, processing vector data. That was one of the questions I've seen on Slido, and making the vector data available also in an analysis-ready form to be integrated with the data cube. And then the hosted processing, availability of data through the X-array-based environment. So all these things that are relevant for the data cube. Where there is an important point, though, is that all these complexities are actually exposed to users via a set of, let's say, 3 groups of APIs. First, we have the OGC compliant APIs, which I think are perfect for integration in the off-the-shelf, all the off-the-shelf tools, which simply need to work. And you can access all this data through it. Then we build the Python interface simply because we feel that Python is, let's say, the main programming language for remote sensing science. And we wanted to put a special focus on making the data as efficiently available as possible in Python environment. And then there are a set of proprietary APIs simply because OGC still doesn't satisfy all the advanced requirements of the data cube features. So we decided to build some additional ones so that users can get all the advanced features. And then, so you have all this complexity exposed over a set of 3 APIs, and then you simply decide which one of these you will use for whatever purpose. Next one. And the first example of such a use is the GEO browser, which hopefully is known to all the participants of this talk. Next one, please. Which is, I mean, the point of the GEO browser, why I chosen it for this, is that it's really simple application, right? It's a web application which doesn't know anything about satellite data, remote sensing, data cubes, nothing at all. It simply uses the web services in order to give to the user the relevant functionality so that the user can do, let's say, most of this analysis. Obviously, it's not meant to be for like hardcore research. It's meant to be for raising awareness and to do some basic things. And you can really do this easily in your browser. And if you are interested in how this is done, you have a GitHub link down there on the right side, because your browser is open source, so you can go and take a look and you see that there's really no magic happening in the application itself. Everything is done on the back end with the services. Next one. Now, so your browser was built by us, but what is more important is that you have hundreds of applications which are built by our users, right? That they build the applications for the end users. And many of them are focused to precision farming for obvious reason, because agriculture is very important and because the satellite data are very feasible for monitoring the agriculture. So so that you have really lots of applications who use our services, and the users don't even know that they are tied to our services. They simply access the data, and that's perfectly fine. Next one, and maybe just go to a next one. Next one. Sorry about that. Yeah, I expected that I'll do my own moving. Now, another example is Pictera, which is a machine learning application, which also uses the same set of services to provide to the users the way to basically label the data that they are interested in, and then perform the generic machine learning exercise. And again, powered by the services so that they have access to complete Sentinel archive. Next one. Now that is an example from Maxar, from their defense-based application, SecureWatch, which also is using the same set of services to provide, in addition to their own very good satellites, the access to the Sentinel data. So all of these are powered by the same set of services built by, operated by the Eurodata. Next one. Now, I mean, these were the applications with, let's say, quite a easy and simple workflow, but you can do a very advanced workflows in the same way. For example, TomTom, like one of the largest navigation companies, they're using the same services to create a world cover, the land cover on the global scale. So they basically access the data through our service. They do all the magic of classification and so on, and they are doing this on the global scale. And it works fine for them because they can focus on the machine learning, on the classification part, not on this basic data processing. Next one. So I just wanted to conclude with these 2 links. So for those who are interested, definitely you should go to eurodatacube.com or sentinelhub.com. These things are very much related for obvious reason. And the next link is if you're interested to get access to it via ESA sponsored access. You can go to this link, but you can also just go and create a trial account and just use it with just your email. So I conclude here and looking forward for a discussion.
Thank you very much, Grega, for this presentation. We could see that the Eurodata Cube is the place to go for Sentinel data, and you have a lot of facilities, and we have seen, and this is great for all the speakers, that you already work on interoperability between the diverse data cubes, because this will come into the questions. So maybe we will go to the questions part now, if you are all ready. Yes? Okay. So Slido has been very active while you were talking, which is really great, because the topic is high tech and it's complex. So meaning that a lot of people have seen the videos, and I'm super happy that there is such a dynamic. So I will take the first question from Laurent Durieux. There are national, continental, and on-demand data cubes with risk of duplicate. Is there any coordination proposed and envisioned by GEO at the global level? Maybe I will give first the floor to Brian and then to Gilberto for this question. Because Brian, you talk about a new community activity on this topic, right?
Yeah, so the Open Earth Alliance was a concept as a GEO community activity that might get more involved in the implementation as well as prototyping some of these ideas. I think Gilberto would agree that a lot of this could come into things like a common API or other possibilities to bring all this together. So I'll let Gilberto go further.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Certainly the Open Earth Alliance is a major development to which the Secretariat is fully supportive. But I think what the vision from the Secretariat can be summarized in two words: institutional empowerment. We don't believe any technology in Earth observation can be useful for decision making, for the Paris Agreement, for sustainable development, if it's not supported by local institutions which are empowered to use it on their needs. So the deal here is, I sincerely, as GEO Secretariat, standards are fantastic and common APIs are fantastic. More important than that is to say, how can the GEO member states and institutions and POs use them? Because what is key here is the ability, as we saw yesterday in Joanna's post presentation, to use Earth observation to provide reports to UNFCCC, to the SDGs, to Sendai framework. And this will only be achieved if the nation states, the countries, the institutions in these countries have access. This, for me, is much more important than APIs and standardization. I think this is the main concern now. Not the other things are not important, but this is so much important that this should be our primary concern.
So it's really the uptake by the users to address these needs, right? Okay. Okay.
Yeah. I will not take the following one, but I will let you to you, Marie-Françoise. I'm going to take mine because I was happy to ask to Greg Giuliani a provocative question. What can't DataCube do? That's a good question. Looking to all the things that you have shown in the different presentation, but also the other, we have the impression that a lot can be done with that. But have you any restriction to the use of DataCube?
Yeah, Thierry, thank you. I guess that's a really good question, because I think we all are, at least all the presenters, but within the community, I say all the people that are involved in the data cubes, we are really positive and really enthusiastic So it might be that we are a little bit biased by the fact that we are really convinced by the benefits of the data cube. I guess that's we have to keep in mind that the data cube technology, no matter what the implementation we choose, it's really meant to facilitate the use of satellite Earth observation data. So it's designed for a specific, I would say, a specific use. It's for the remote sensing community, and it has really lowered the barriers to access and to work with the data. So I would say that the limitation that we can see in the data cubes are the well-known limitation that we know in the remote sensing community, and it's not a magical tool that can do everything. It can do a lot of things with remote sensing data that we were not able to do before, but it's not a magical tool at all. So just to give you an example, for the moment, this is something we don't know yet how to do it, to ingest drone imagery into a data cube environment. And I'm really talking about the Odyssey because this is the one that we have experience on. But for example, also ingesting hyperspectral data, we don't know yet. So this is something we also need to learn. So there is a clear limitation also on that, for example. Other types of limitations, but these are related also on how we can handle the vector data together with the raster data. That's extremely important. We are not only processing raster data. We need to have both types of data if we talk, for example, of generating statistics, specific statistics for a given region in a country. So that's the things we need to solve. So we have a couple of ideas. For example, we have linked the Swiss Data Cube with one of the platforms that we are developing that is able to manage vector data, so that we can then provide statistics to the decision makers on snow cover or whatever type of information that are requested by the Swiss government. So that's, for me, these are the two main limitations. But really keep in mind that it's really designed for handling satellite Earth observation data.
Thanks to stress this. I think Grega was also maybe have an idea on this question.
I just wanted to add and basically follow up on what Gilberto said previously. I think that the existing technology of the data cubes is quite advanced. I mean, you can do with different data cubes, and I don't think there is a problem if they are duplicated one even. You can do a lot more of the things that they are done with it. So what I think that we really should focus is not what can or cannot be done, but that people really use this. And I mean, both the governments as well as the normal people, because I think that they are under-facilitated to as powerful as they are.
Thank you. Marie-Françoise?
Yes, I was going to invite also Grega to talk, to answer another question from Laurent Durieux, I think, because it was a follow-up on vector data, and I know you talk about that into your video. You provide a way to mix vector data and complete the data cube with vector data. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't find this a particularly, let's say, advanced thing. I mean, vector data, you handle it in a database. So we simply use the PostgreSQL database, and then you expose this data through a set of APIs, which, same as Gilberto mentioned in the beginning, they are able to provide for a specific cell of the grid, specific time period, the relevant vector data. In the easiest way, you can simply visualize them so that you expose their attributes as a dimensions. So in reality, it's actually exactly the same as with raster data. It's just that you don't necessarily have the full grid cell, right? That's the only difference. But even that you can interpolate if you need to for the purpose of the use of within the data cube. In reality, where these data are mostly used, at least now and in our case, is with machine learning. where you typically want to go and find the labels, which are often vector data, because you have the administrative data such as, I don't know, a buildings register and land use maps and so on and so on. So you take for a specific set of pixels, you try to find out which vectors are covering it, and then you simply give to these pixels relevant attributes from these vectors. So in reality, just combining different data sets, and similarly, in a typical GIS tool, you see vector data as a raster layer, right? I mean, you can also expose this same kind of raster layer to the data cube.
Okay, we can follow up, I think, on this question with Gilberto or Carini, because you have mentioned machine learning that can require to access some in situ, or did you use some type of implementation also with in situ or vector data into the Brazilian data cube?
Yes, we are using vector data in the Brazil Data Cube too. We are using the samples, the ground samples of land use and cover classes. We are organizing it in our infrastructure. So we use these samples, point or polygons, can be represented by point or polygons. So we extract information from these points or polygon vector data from these data cubes. It's a very important task that we have to perform. It's a very useful function that we use a lot in our project, and we are using we are organizing land use and cover global land use and cover data sets too that are vector data. For example, the polygon in Brazil, for example, the polygons of deforestation or deforestation alerts. We organize this data in our infrastructure. To extract information from this vector data from the data cubes that we are providing in our project. So this is a very important task that data cubes platforms have to provide, in my opinion. Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to insist a little bit on this topic because we understand that this data will be accessed not into the data cube, but with the data, satellite data, which is in the data cube, but with a different maybe type of storage and type of access. But yes, this is very important if we want to be user-centric, because most of the pilot scenarios, whichever, will require to have this this mixture of heterogeneous data. So the message here, I think, is that this problem is solved. Not into the data cube, but it's solved. Yes?
No, may I just make a compliment that what about Karine was talking first? Sorry. But we are really developing also new APIs, more user-centric and much more high level on the top of very good APIs, such as the web feature services or web coverage services. So, for example, what Karine was mentioning was about web services that give us the trajectory of the land trajectories. So we have some much more abstract concepts on top of other services. So this is also another way to complement the integration between the data cubes with the raster and the vector data.
Gilberto wanted to talk to Gilberto Kumara.
Well, I think we have three responses which are correct from the technical point of view. Greg's, Karini's, and Gilberto's, and Greg would also say the same thing. Integrating vector data into data cubes is simple technically, but the problem is not solved. The problem that we face is different. We need to have users using data cubes in the cloud. Okay, so all the data, raster data, is in the cloud, but the vector data that contains the polygons with the samples is not. and the privacy and the intellectual property rights of that vector data have to abide by the user's IP rights and not by the cloud's IP rights. So that's how we need a protocol which does not exist, which is not clearly defined, to make sure that when a user uses a cloud service and she or he provides his polygons of data, that data is completely covered by his own intellectual property rights. And this does not exist. This has to be discussed and has to be agreed as a standard way of doing it. I'm not saying I have the answer. Technically, there are many ways to solve it. But at the protocol level, at the standard level, there's still a need to solve that nicely.
This was mentioned in the session before about reusable knowledge on this property on the data. I let you take the next question, Thierry.
Yeah, in fact, I think there is a question which is going to be addressed to Gregor and also to Brian. Brian, in your video, you're talking about a network of data cube, and the question is also addressed to the video of Gregor about the fact that the client that you develop, Gregor, access to a different implementation of data cube, and the question was also for the network of data cube. Can we imagine that this way of accessing to different implementation of DataCube and the idea of the network of DataCube is finally something related to a DataCube system of system? So, Gregor, Brian, up to you.
I can respond first.
Go ahead, Gregor.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that the answer is clearly yes, and I think that it's happening already. So we are already connecting to several data cubes, if you want. I mean, like if you go to the EO browser, you will see that we use the GIPS data cube from NASA, I think, or USGS, I don't know, to be honest. And then the ProbaV. Now, this is a simple type of use, right? Because we just use the images from there, but technically the concept is exactly the same. And now it's just a matter of going one level deeper of integration on the API level between the data cubes, which is also happening. For example, we have integrated the Open Data Cube with the Euro Data Cube functionality, so that if you're using the Open Data Cube software, you can actually access the on-demand Euro Data Cube generation. Then the Sentinel-1 processing chain that Brian mentioned, that is again an example of this kind of integration, because in order to generate this Sentinel-1 data, basically we will use the Euro Data Cube technology on demand. So in reality, this is happening already, and technically I believe that it is again an easy solution. What needs to be done is a cooperation between the different parties that are building these data cubes, and this is why I specifically like this kind of meeting, so that we coordinate. And at the end, basically, it is just a set of APIs which we need to integrate in a kind of a microservices level, right? And the only thing that is important is that these APIs are operational, and ideally that they are fast, so that then you can integrate this in an efficient way. And I think that that's something that will have to be done, because we will never come into a situation where we will have all the data at the same place. We'll always have different data in different clouds, in different locations, in Africa, in US, in Europe, and so on and so on. And this kind of integration will simply be something that is like the way how we talk between each other.
Yeah, I think that last point was important, that I do see that the data will precipitate all around the world in various data cubes. And those data cubes can each have their own API infrastructure. They're going to have data stored in a variety of formats. And if we can figure out how to solve some of these interoperability challenges, then we're going to be able to bring this data together and use it. We're starting to see that already. we can access Sentinel-2 data in one location, Sentinel-1 data in another location, Landsat in another location, bring them all together, and perhaps commonly detect water or something like that. So there are some challenges, right? You've got to deal with things like projections and different spatial resolutions and differences in the bands and so forth. And then, the differences in APIs. So all these things are challenges, but they're not impossible. And if you look at the way things are evolving, I don't think there's going to be one giant data cube. And as Greg has said, these things are going to probably show up in what might be regional infrastructures. And then what we need to be able to do is to grab sources of information and data from various infrastructures and figure out how to operationally combine them. And that'll be the more challenging thing in the future. But it's going to open up an incredible amount of information for advanced science and machine learning and different products. So it'll be pretty incredible where we could go with this.
Just to follow up, because maybe a link with the regional activity within GEO, and Gilberto Camara can also intervene on that, and Fang Nguyen also. We are looking to different implementation of data cube in different area of the world, linked with regional activities. So do you think that, Gilberto, there will be an interest to try to interact on all these elements for GEO and to tune it in a good way?
Well, I think what we first have to understand that there is, as the economists say, there is no free lunch. And what we, of course, need in terms of regions are funding schemes that will provide the necessary funding to implement a stable, let's say, 5-year solution that can be accessible to the countries involved. So Digital Earth Africa is a very interesting example of this, where you have funding guaranteed by the Helmsley Foundation partly and by the Australian government on the other part, to develop a solution that will benefit the whole of African countries. So I think that's a good solution for the regions. Of course, similar solutions can happen in other parts of the world, but I think this is how I see a regional GEO. Of course, you can develop a GEO for example, for Asia and call it a regional GEO, but that's not, the fact that it covers a geographical area does not make it regional in the sense of a public service. So the issue here is a public service that allows many users to use the facility from different countries, hopefully, but in a public and open way, using public data and producing public information. Costs money. It costs much less than the cost of degradation of our environment, but still costs money and costs organization. So the challenge here for GEO is that how can we organize the potential technology of so many qualified individuals, many of them who are in this virtual room now, with a funding scheme that will allow, let's say, global information to be produced at the local level. And I think it is the most important challenge for all of us, as we have seen in the recent COVID. It tells you there's no substitute for public information. So I think the regional GEO, yes, but they need money, they need resources, they will not blossom out of nowhere.
Thanks, Gilberto. Marie-Françoise?
Yes, I would like to take a last question and address to Fang. It's quite connected with what we have discussed before. What is the main limitation to data cube, processing speed, disk space, hosting costs, or something else? So Fang, you are addressing this implementation of data cubes on huge areas, continents like Africa, and which is the main challenge for you that you can see on this size of data cubes and this very different environment for Australia and Africa?
Thank you, Ari, François. Definitely there are lots of challenges, and I should say that we are still learning through this process of operating to continental scale data cubes and platforms. So all of these are challenges, or at least at some stage we have to solve them. And and I think the main thing that our data engineers or engineers are focusing on are really making sure that the data can be accessed efficiently. So, and this is through all these different steps, through making the input data sets in a cloud native format so that can be efficiently processed through the cloud infrastructure, and two, improving the ODC underlying code to be more efficient in accessing the data and manage the data, improve the database efficiency, and two, using more clever ways to doing the analysis. And I should say that we continue to find ways to improve this. So there's really room to improve always, and more smart people start to use these, and there's always good ideas to help us improve these solutions as well.
So, thank you very much, Fang. This is great to have a return on experience on such not experiments, implementations. So, I think we are reaching the end of the session. I would like, first, because I will not have the opportunity to talk again, to thank you really much, and to summarize that my understanding is that all the pieces are there, everything is ready. The issues, there are some issues because it is not magic. It is a complex system that we try to show as something which is magic for the user, working in the background, but which is really complex. And so there are still issues, but they are identified. There are return on experience. There are real users. I think you have mentioned, Fang, in your presentation that you have hundreds of users from business, government, etc. So we have this loop to get the return on experience. So I would say that we have everything now to be successful with that. Brian says that he can see an infinite capacity of uses. The message I would like to bring to the partners we have in our eShape project is that they should really consider the data cubes, because the technology is not now only conceptual. It's there. It's now there to be used. And what is needed is to have more users, more different heterogeneous scenarios, not only land cover, even if it's a very important one. We know there are much more. And we need more, because this is what you are waiting, if I understood it clearly. You want this uptake, you want this return on experience, right? I begin in the order of the videos. Grega, what is your last word? What do you expect? What is your message to the audience?
Use the data cubes. I think that is the only thing that is really relevant. They are out there, they are working. Whatever of them, I mean, either of these that were presented or some others, just use them so that we actually benefit from all of these data that are there.
Greg.
Yeah, I agree with Greg. I think every element are there, and really, I think now we are reaching the time with the technology and with the data that we have that we cannot say anymore we don't know what happened. So we can really look at what's occurring on a specific area, and we can learn from the past, define the present situation, and we can even model the future changes. So I think that's the main message for me.
Gilberto?
No, the main message is GEO has a very capable community, as we've seen, and I can concur with Greg and Greg and Grega. Use the data cubes, but also help GEO, be part of GEO, come to us and help us develop this technology. There's a lot of good people who could help us. We have a lot of good people, but we need much more. Please join the community.
Brian?
Yes, I would say that I think we have a huge number of untapped users in the world. people that have not traditionally used Earth observation data and have seen the barrier to entry just to be too high and too complicated. And what I think the Open Data Cube and some of these things that we've discussed today, they will open up a whole new ability to bring on new users, to get people learning on how to use the data to solve, to answer questions and solve problems. I'm really excited about the potential. I've seen it in Africa and I've seen it in developing parts of the world. So it's exciting. Thanks.
Thank you. Frank?
I think there's an emergent theme here. I would say that definitely we need more users to try to use these technologies, and we can't really foresee what kind of challenges they will face. And until they actually hit those problems, we'll try to solve them.
Thank you. And Karine or Gilberto, we cannot see you, one of you, because we are reaching the end.
Okay, so I can talk. I agree with Barry, and I would like just to add that we have to produce open data and open software to promote the use of data cubes. Just this final message. Thank you.
Thank you for this final message. We have understood that open community and cooperation is important also to keep in the same dynamic to develop these data cubes. Thierry, you want to conclude?
Yeah, I want to thank all the participants and the presenter about the excellent presentation video they have prepared and done. Just to give you some input about the question, we start with 21 questions. We are still we have answered to some of them, but there are still more than 20 questions on the chat on the Slido. So I think there is some duty for you on looking to them and try to help the people to answer it. So thank you very much for your participation, for taking your time and in any period of the day around the world. And we have a very nice presentation of all the part of the world on this topic. It's one of the technology. Of course, we will focus on the following one and on the other one on the future, but that's really a very, very good session that we had, and thank you for that. Thank you very much for that.
Yes, and the questions will stay open, and you will receive answers in the next days. Thank you.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care of you. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.